Welcome back, everyone, to our coverage of the Chess.com Open. The playoffs continue. Myself, Grandmaster Ramon Hamilton, joined as always by Grandmaster Eric Hansen. And Eric, today we are getting into the losers bracket. Now, don't let that fool you. I actually think, Eric, that some of the most exciting players are packed in the losers bracket and in today's matchups. What about you?
Yeah, outside of Magnus in the winners bracket, pretty much the field is just as strong in the losers bracket with the heightened, risk of players being eliminated. So today, only doing the losers bracket, but we're going to see some big names go home.
That's right. That's right. And the format, while it is the same, we want to remind you exactly what that same format is. Of course, this is a 16-player double elimination bracket. The losers bracket is what we're focusing on today, which means these players are on their last life. It's 10 minutes. There's no extra time. These matchups are going to be all best of 2 matches, and they're playing for a top 3 spot. But it's kind of crazy to think about, Eric. We're playing for these top 3 spots and those EWC spots, but we started with almost 1,600 players. This is a largest narrowed down to just 6 potential names. Obviously, Vyacheslav Duda, he did punch his ticket through, but there's that last and final EWC spot, Eric, up for grabs. And as we take a look at the bracket, we can see the names that are going to be vying for that last remaining spot. Of course, Magnus Carlsen waiting in the grand final. He had a long road to get there, but honestly, it started out pretty easy for him. Then it was Denis Lazovic. Then it was Vyacheslav Duda. He had to go to Armageddon twice, back-to-back 3-2 scores. He finally ended up making it through. Duda had an amazing event, ended up losing to Magnus. That dropped him down to the losers final. But we're focused on the losers bracket, and we're starting in the losers quarterfinals. Denis Lazovic, Sina Movahed, Nihal, and Abdusattorov. Those are the games we're starting with, and just naming those 4 players, plus with Duda waiting, Eric, those are some of the strongest players vying for just one single remaining EWC spot. It's going to be one of these 4 names here.
Yeah, it's nice we get to focus on fewer matches, and because some of the players we haven't been able to watch as much. I think one of those players is Nihal Sarin, just because he comfortably made it through his first match. Eventually ran into a very informed Duda. So hard to say that even though he's in the losers bracket, that he hasn't been, it doesn't have to do with his chess too much, because Duda looked good against everybody.
Yep.
And then the storyline with Sina Movahed, really looking forward to seeing that today, because he is one of my favorite players to kind of up and coming juniors to watch online. And this is a big break. If he can have a really good Saturday, ticket to EWC confirmed.
That's right. Speaking a little bit about that match, Denis Lazovic, Sina Movahed, the players are just a couple matchups away, 2 wins, right? When you think about it, it really boils down to that. And these are best of 2. The fact that we're getting this clash here between Denis Lazovic, Sina Movahed, and it's only going to be best of 2. I mean, the action is just going to be so high stakes right off the bat. And I'm very curious to see how these 2 styles match up, because I actually find them very different, Eric. Denis, very controlled. He's a player that so far what we've seen from him has been maybe he's becoming a bit more well-rounded. You saw him branching out into E4. He's not just playing that Catalan that we know him for. Sina, I find, a bit more highly tactical, maybe takes more risk, but really trusts the moves that he's putting on the board.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, Denis is probably a huge favorite. Funny, like Denis is very young. People talk about that. Sina Movahed even more so at around 15 years old, and you'd think for the most part the veteran Denis Lazovic hardly ever blunders. Like, that's one of his strengths. But this, Sina Movahed is extremely challenging to play against tactically, and there are some other players in the field that have that same type of quality, but kind of waiting to see this next generation of chess prodigies seems to be getting stronger and stronger, people say, with like engines and the resources online. And I wonder if he brings something new to the table, a new flavor of being a very combative, like, rapid chess player.
Yeah, and I actually thought Denis Lazovic was part of the next generation, but we've already got the next one after that. And it's just,
That's right.
crazy to listen and just really believe that Dennis is actually the veteran in this
Mhm.
matchup. It's shocking, but it's true. And that's what we have to go with. He's also not fighting for that spot, so there is that hunger on the side of Cena that Dennis is already qualified. So I think that definitely plays into it. Abdusatorov and Nihal, that's the other matchup. And you mentioned we haven't really dropped in as much on those games from Nihal. I feel that thinking back to the event, Nihal has been resourceful. He's been clutch, and Abdusatorov has actually had a fairly decent event. Right, he just dropped down to the losers bracket, fairly early, but then he's had a good run in the losers bracket. And I thought that Nordebek has been playing quite well. So I feel that there's a clear favorite for me in that matchup, and it's Nihal. You'd mentioned before he's really looking for that proof, that big step in to the elite, and these big match wins that will set him apart. He was in the EWC last year. He's looking to return.
Yeah, Nihal, one thing he's really good at is the time scrambles. We saw that briefly yesterday. He almost caught up on the clock, a lot of pre-moving anticipation in the end game. But, he doesn't have that signature maybe come from behind win because he had that really smooth match, I think, earlier. Whereas Norderbeck, we've
Hmm.
seen him claw back from lost position
Oh yeah. Hmm.
over and over, whether that turns into a win or salvaging half a point. So it feels like, in some ways, based on the positions they've had, or what we've seen, he's had more adversity, warmed up, defended positions very well. Nihal remains to be seen. I think it's a good clash, but yeah, Lazovic, Movahed, Sara, and Abdusatov. I think we're getting an Armageddon out of this group.
That's a pretty fair prediction, I would say. We have the two board view up for everyone right now. We will focus in on these games individually, but nice to I think I like this production here. We have all the cams up, and we see this G4 move on the board from Dennis. G4 followed by G5, Erica. A very aggressive approach, but it looks rooted in the fact that this bishop the light squared bishop on e4 is not one that can be easily dealt with, right? If you pushed it back to g6, well, then there might be the h4 move coming. So what we do see instead is pressure on the position, e4 pawn loose, and that looks like a pawn that can't really be defended without compromising the position. So already Cena might be thinking counterplay.
Yeah, no, we don't have a bit of an imbalance. Black castling early. And it feels like there's even questions with Dennis will castle at all. Do you castle queenside here and potentially invite action on the c file? Because I'm seeing ideas. I'm seeing the plan for Dennis. It feels like long-term pressure on that
Mhm.
e4 pawn and playing against the knight right now, which is a couple moves away from centralizing and becoming more of a useful piece. So I see the vision for white. What I am curious about is what is that long term vision for black in terms of like, yeah. uh, Well, we see b5, so I think
Yeah.
that answers my question.
There you go. The
Let's
asked and
ascend the pawn.
answered. I
Yep.
think the energy behind B5 suits the style that we've come to expect from Cena in this event. He's not waiting around, right? He's not trying to just play Rook C8, C5. White would happily exchange on C5, move the king over to B1 to relative safety. Here, it's going to be a bit of a race because look, Bishop E2 is a very expected move. It's going to hit the knight eventually. The question is when you move the knight, then comes H5. And H5 will pry open the H file. So it's a bit of a race here in terms of an attack. I think that Dennis's position is clearly the better one, better structure, target on E4 on a light square, target on C6 now after the move B5. So I do think Dennis doesn't have to go all in. He can trade queens, right? It would be a good position if he traded queens as well. Whereas I think Cena is a bit more all in with the approach here because the move B5 comes with its own weaknesses.
Yeah, I think it's really nice for Dennis that, trade queens, you have a comfortable endgame. He likes those positions a lot. It gives him more range in winning the match. He's shown to be able to play tactically sharp and do very
Mhm.
well. But his bread and butter is winning those endgames, those slightly better positions, without really giving opponents counterplay. And there's many endgames here. if queens come off, you mentioned the e4 pawn is weak.
Yeah.
B5 pawn is a bit extended now, and those pawns are on light squares. They can be targeted by the bishop, and in general, the bishop is a better piece than the knight in an open position, in a position with pawns on both sides of the board. It's some long range play, which means consistently Cena's going to have tough decisions regarding queen trades. You can avoid
Yeah.
the queen trade, but the next move, let's say just queen b6, maybe queen d6, continue gaining space with the threat of a queen trade. And I think that puts black in I think it's a very good decision, because these endgames, I just don't see where the black knight goes. That's a great place. You could put the knight
Yeah.
somewhere on the board, and I'm not sure, even if you allowed me to, what I would be able to answer. Like, where is the best outpost? Because on the light squares, that bishop can start hunting it.
Yeah, there's no firm square for the knight. First of all, you're putting the question to Cena, letting him calculate, saying, okay, if you want to play queen b6, you have to also be comfortable sacking the e4 pawn.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you trade the queen, the b pawn is hanging. I'm liking the move, eventually bishop g4 for white. It looks like it covers all the squares the knight could want to move to, just preventing knight e6, knight f5, and moves like that. Meanwhile, swinging the rook on h1 into the game, whether that's rook c1 and rook c5, 6, 7, or rook d1 and just doubling up. So this looks like a position that if the queens trade, I do expect Dennis to find success here.
Yeah, one thing we didn't mention too much is in the current position, pushing the h file and the pawn, and I think that's very possible. But white doesn't need to do that. And the upside of not playing h5 is right now the g5 pawn, the h4 pawn, they just restrict
Hmm.
black from extending the pawns on the king side, gaining space. So positionally, it's actually good to keep the pawns where they are. It's more of a tactical opportunity if you decide to play h5,
Yep.
and just not necessary. Keep
No.
threatening to trade the queens, because these endgames are very favorable for Lazovic because of how
Yep.
poorly placed the knight is and some other factors like those loose pawns.
If the queen went to c5 or e5 instead of rook e8, we would have seen rook d5. So he was putting Cena in a position where there was just no good way to avoid a queen trade on that previous move. So even though rook e8 is a question mark, I mean, it's totally understandable. It's the follow up to his idea of queen e7. He wants the rook on e7 where it defends everything. But look, rook to d5 comes. The b pawn is hit. He's probably going to play a4 here and leave more weaknesses. The other rook can swing in. I'm waiting for that bishop to make an appearance on g4 at some point. Meanwhile, rook c1, rook c4. You have rook b5 to disconnect things. There's no a5 move to secure the pawns. And Eric, this is definitely a position we like what Dennis has got. I think he's making good use of the white pieces. I was going to suggest taking a look at the other game because it's another almost very similar imbalance. And it's actually kind of in the other direction here. I think Nihal has an incredibly favorable position when it comes to maneuvering and playing this endgame. Just the knight against the bishop and that dark square control to be determined whether he can make something out of it.
And Nihal's position feels like it's much more comfortable than normal, with the H file opened up for his rook, just long
Mhm.
term. Like, let's say it's half opened on H3, because it restricts White's ability to, I feel like, gain space, attack the D pawn, especially here, because H3 pawn is just weak. And you see the knight on C5, the pawn on A5. It makes it very hard for White with this current configuration to kick it out.
Yep.
C3, B4, because you got a light square bishop. You can't, and then otherwise, if you can't kick this knight away, it's centralized, covers a lot of squares, and something about the setup feels like black has more potential. And I think we've mentioned it a bit, and we haven't seen it in the event, but knights in speed chess and time scrambles, really good maneuvering, tricky pieces. Not too many games have gone down to the wire where you see that knight roam around and take away a fork and win material, but there is that potential always in some of these positions. Even here, bishop on c4, I it's on a decent square, but I feel like if black has time, and that's not a given, d5 strategically ideal. But I guess the bishop is on c4, and the reason the king is on d4 is to always meet d5 with king takes c5. because if
Yes.
black had the time to play d5, this bishop does not have a good diagonal.
And I
There's
was
a lot of
thinking
timing
about
here.
pawn takes f4, and then I realized, well, maybe the idea is rook h4, which is
It is.
very
Yeah.
clever. Not allowing, for example, if the pawn's just traded naturally, then h4 would be played by white, and that's not what you want to have happen. White can double the rooks, push that pawn, use it as a distraction. So I like rook h4, reinforcing that dark square concept. And at some point, because the move d5 is so hard to achieve, I find myself looking at the move b6. Not my first instinct, but I want to defend the knight and then play the move d5. That allows me to then bring the knight back to e6, remove the king, and finally my pieces can start to get going. King d6, and my rook on d7 is finally a participant.
Well, we see this position on the board, Amon. You're completely right. Rook h4. If black can kick this king away from d4 and achieve d5, I think Nihal, it's not
Mhm.
winning. It's not even maybe a huge advantage, but it's a better position and it's a much easier to play position. And
Right.
combined with Nihal's clock skills and just lasting pressure, put him as a heavy favorite there.
Yep.
Although
And
he's
there it
playing
is.
Nodirbek, who's defended really tough position, so I kind of have to give him credit there. He's
No,
defended much
he's
worse than this.
emerging, yeah, as one of the better defenders, but certainly in the event, but really just in top chess. He's amazing. But it's certainly not a position he ever wants to put himself in. It's a skill he has, but it's not one you want to put to use too often. In terms of taking this pawn back, while rook takes f4 was the idea previously, you've also now blockaded the h pawn. So pawn takes on f4 can be reconsidered because if you take with the rook, I find myself also, you just got to be careful of h4. I think at the
Mhm.
moment there is a d4 check in the position, but I think it's fair to take now with the g pawn as well. So we'll see what he decides to do. The knight, I'm sure, wants to reroute to e6 and maybe to the f4 square. So it's tempting to take with the rook to leave it open.
Yeah, if you take with the rook, as you mentioned, 96 knight of 96 knight f4. If you take with the pawn, that pawn on f4 takes away, king e3, king g3, and it frees up the g5 square.
Yep.
Maybe that's where the knight's headed, targeting f3 and h3. But both options look really nice, which makes the decision a bit harder. No matter what is black, you're a little bit more active, a little bit better,
Hmm.
but you're trying to find out of the two options, which one makes it harder for white to defend.
And I was actually going to say, let's bring up the two board view because we're going to get a great look at the comparison because we're seeing the exact same imbalance, but on one board, Dennis is making the bishop work, and on the other board, it feels like Nihal is making the knight work. So just different treatment, obviously very different positions, but the exact same imbalance.
It does help though for Dennis is he's up a pawn, right?
Yep,
That
he did
and
win that one since we last looked, but all expected in the sense that when we left, we knew that he was in a position he could make that progress.
yeah, stylistically and what to expect today, I think Movahed, he thrives in those rich, sharp middle
Mhm,
games. But when you catch him right now in an end game that's a bit more technical and just without a lot of firepower, it's a good strategy. He's still catching up in my eyes, strategically, positionally. It's more in the tactics and calculation and counterattacking that I rate him really good, capable of beating a lot of the best players, and we've seen him win Title Tuesday. But when it comes to just like holding, I'm not going to say boring positions, but positions where you have to equalize, trade off pieces, you know,
mhm.
trade, whatever, just make a draw. No, that doesn't suit him. He thrives in open, sharp positions. So Dennis, those players reaching that end game, trading off the pieces, I'll usually favor him a lot versus Cena at the current moment. Rook
Right, and
g7 here from Nihal. Why is that a? Hmm.
it seems like a reasonable move. King e5, king even to d4, but d6 is safe enough. The rook's coming to g3. It feels like Nihal is playing the game almost perfectly using the
Agreed.
imbalance. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing there. And oh, look at that! Just looking at the other board there, f4. What a
That's
nice tactic.
it wins the piece, but when you win the piece, you get a pass pawn that can promote pretty quickly. So
Hmm.
understandable resignation, and now we're just focused on and this on this game with Sarin pushing his black against Abdu Sadarov, and I
Yes.
think it's really nice if you look at Black's setup. We're saying we really like how he's playing because White can hardly move. The only piece that feels like it has some range is the one rook. Everything else, Black's both two rooks, the knight at f4 pawn, control the pieces while putting pressure and just to move away from capturing on h3. Is this a mistake, Amon? Can we just take on h3 with our g rook and then no f4? F4 is loose. I was going to say rook takes here,
Right.
bishop e7, hit the pawn chain from the back, and if rook h6, f4 would be
Yes.
hanging.
That's right.
So yeah, Nihal correctly pulled his rook back just to cover the seventh
We're
rank.
in that territory of Nodirbek doing that thing he does where he defends tough positions. Imagine that bishop stations itself on g4. How do you even make progress after that? The f4 pawn would actually be hanging. Your whole position starts to unravel. That's why rook g1 is given the blue arrow. You want to maintain that edge. You got to get inside the position before the bishop locks you out. He doesn't manage to do it. Makes a reasonable move, but Eric, I think that Nordberg is starting to flip the position just a little bit.
Well, his bishop wasn't good where it was. G4 is a huge improvement, and yeah, you correctly mentioned that the rook hitting the pawn, disconnecting Black's rook. It kind of just questions Black's current setup. The current setup
Yeah,
no longer applies. It does
that's
not
right.
effectively, if it doesn't target those weak pawns, you need to find another outlet for those rooks. Is it on the D file? Because Black does have a queen side majority when it comes to pawns. No, look at Nordebek. He just picked up the pawn on f4. He's
Yep.
up a pawn. And even though Black now, Nihal's activating the king and pushing on the queen side,
I
White
mean,
has the two passed pawns now and a lot more room than just a
yep.
few moves ago.
It's incredible because Black is still doing well. The knight's coming to b4, and there will be some
Oh,
b5
wow.
move.
Look at
Look at
this.
this invasion.
You have options. Knight b4, targeting c2, knight c3, maybe looking at a mating idea. But Norderbeck playing h4, he's saying, I don't see it, right? Because, or maybe he's saying there's no move to stop it, even if I do see it. Let's just get
Right.
into a race as the players, approach time trouble.
That's right.
You
Rook
want
to
to trade off the
d6.
d rook as White. Is it maybe moving this rook to e6, threatening to trade? Because in terms of a race, if we trade off a pair of rooks as White, I
Hmm.
can start pushing my H pawn, forcing Black's rook to be passive,
That's
and then I
right.
feel much more comfortable in any sort of race. Hmm.
So
Nihal,
h6 looks like a move you can throw in. Um, D3, if you're not playing D3, like at some point, what have all these moves been for?
well, you have
Right?
to
If
watch out. If you
D3,
take this pawn, it's just funny that king d3 and the pin
yep.
wins the piece.
Oh, this is I mean, the position completely flipped. Black had all the dark squares fully dominating, but there's a reason that we couldn't express so much concern for Nordebek's position because he's gotten out of these time and time again, and he's doing it here.
This is incredible because, yeah, I'm looking at those lines with d3. D3 doesn't do anything. It's funny. Black's
Yep.
king on b2 is somehow misplaced in some lines. This is surprising. Why is he giving up his h pawn?
He definitely missed that idea. He was just
Wow.
trying to get rid of the rook because you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier trading the rook is such a good idea. Completely spaced out on the H pawn there. This could still flip around completely.
It could. I mean, the rook for Black only had one job, stop the H pawn. Now it's free to roam, and even though White's up a pawn, at some point in the future, Black will take c2, and it really
Yep.
becomes a race.
Rook G5, Rook H2, and the position gets a little bit tricky there. C2 will be captured in that case.
You can get away with Rook f4. And you have to be
Right?
very careful as White. I'm just going to show a variation where something like this, if
Hmm.
everything trades off, there's ways to mess it up.
Ways to
Black's
lose.
king is closer.
It's so funny, probably, for everyone watching, seeing this king on b2. And yes, it actually put itself there on b2. And it's probably one of the safest squares on the board.
Yeah, it's on a dark square. It's shielded, using White's pawns as a shield. There might be some positions here where Nordrbek gives up a piece to stop the pawn, and you kind of have an imbalance of a rook
Right.
versus rook and two pawns versus rook and knight.
Hmm.
Curious what Nihal has in mind him on when it comes to this knight on a3. Knight b1 was the only useful check, but I'm
Yeah,
not
you could
sure he's going to
try
press.
A5, maybe.
Yeah, a5. Nordrbek plays for a win.
30
Seems like all
seconds.
the
And
time.
we know that I feel like both of these players absolutely are ready to use that clock as a weapon. You get rook against knight, play it on for win. Rook against bishop, play it on for win.
Putting the rook behind the pawn, but that feels like white can play bishop
Oh
c4.
my
It's
gosh,
mate.
it's
It's
checkmate.
mate.
It's
I
checkmate in one. Nodirbek, he can't believe it hasn't been played.
oh
Oh
man.
my goodness.
I
There was a
said bishop.
moment, Eric, where we thought he might not see it. Even Nihal had to take a moment and realize there was mate in one on the board, and a little clap there is the only way you can deal with that. Unbelievable.
Yeah, Nordrbek, he hardly ever blunders, especially when he gets going. When he flips the position, feeds him energy, you see the body language change. So here, he was thinking, how do I, instead of, look, I've equalized, I'm a little bit better, transitioning to how do I play for a win? And just in time trouble, mistakes can happen because the way he defended the position was incredible. And one move blunder.
That's
That's rare.
unbelievable. You hardly ever see that, especially for someone like Nordrbek. And obviously, we're gonna get into these next matches. Eric, Nihal takes the win. We want to make sure to remind everyone what things look like big picture, right? Talking about that EWC leaderboard, we have qualified players. Yanchistov Duda qualified from this very event, the Chess.com Open. We have Magnus, Ali Reza, and Denis Lazovic through the SCC as well. Take note of some of the names on this list, right? Moving down that leaderboard, those are probably up till number 10. That's where you sort of want to be in order to qualify through the leaderboard. Sina Movahed, he's 20th. He's scraping his way onto this graphic here. Yeah, 39 points. But with a high placement in this event, Eric, it's still possible for him to qualify. What that means is he's in a must-win game against Denis Lazovic, who's already qualified himself. We're going to see must-win territory for two players here, Nodirbek and Sina Movahed. And, probably a little more difficult for Nodirbek get his head back in the game after a checkmate in one blunder from a position where a move ago he had the advantage.
Yeah, he had the advantage. Nihal was just moving his knight around. I mean, there was nothing else for him to do. It was White's job to dictate it and play for a win. And what did we say? We said knights were tricky. We probably thought a fork would be the trick, but here it was just setting up a nice mating pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And even this elite player like Nordrbek can blunder. Cena's game I'm on was not very comfortable. That was kind
No.
of like bad from the very beginning. And he never had a chance. Not even like what we saw with Nihal. He got his king in. There was some tactics. The game got into the time scramble period. Against Lazovic, he was controlled the entire way through. In
Mm-hmm.
the second game, the good thing is he has white, but he's really going to have to make sure to avoid those types of positions.
Yeah, I don't think right off the bat his position lends itself to maybe those highly tactical struggles that we have seen, as we see we're in E4, E5 position here. Dennis, I feel like if he needs a draw and his style naturally sort of leans that direction, he's certainly comfortable achieving that result. But Cena is a player that we're going to have to watch in this game. How's he going to create something? Because these E4, E5 positions, stuff doesn't just create itself. You sort of have to make it happen. There is an imbalance, bishop for knight, and also we can see the pawn structure. C takes b6 had to be played, and you could say just that small change in structure, maybe the c4 move coming. These are things that at least imbalance the position, and if
Mhm.
you need a win, you're not just going to outplay at this level. You can't count on that, so you start with an imbalance.
Yeah, and those E45 positions, very topical in top level chess, where it feels like nothing's happening. They're maneuvering, and then all of a sudden, there's one idea and the position opens up. So on one hand, some trades, those have occurred, nothing too crazy. On the other hand, you often get a long game in these positions, which means in a must-win situation, try to time the break when you open up the position, but it avoids that early liquidation. Like, yes, two pieces have been traded, but two more
Hmm.
unlikely to happen too easily. Or as you mentioned, there's an imbalance. There's something to work with, and I've seen a move ahead, use the clock very, very well in online games when the position isn't quite enough to work with.
Yeah, I'm looking at the game from Nodirbek as well. A clear decision to play something a bit eccentric. This is not your typical handling for Black. Probably not the opening he might have played had he won the first game, but it's the one that we're getting now. The bishop on b7 blunted by this d5 move from White. So I feel like looking at the two positions, maybe that's the game, Eric, that's a bit more rich to dive into right at the beginning of the round here.
Yeah, I agree. These Queen's Indian positions, I was playing as Black, and sometimes you get cramped. It might already be uncomfortable, or not everyone's taste to have, as you mentioned, the light squared bishop blunted a bit. And Nordebek will have the psychological, challenge of sometimes there's a best move. It's an opening well. That involves a trade and equalizing the position. We saw Magnus Carlsen yesterday play the King's Indian in a must-win game against Jan-Krzysztof Duda, and that was keeps all the pieces, and he's looking for material imbalances, not just clear equalization. So that's the challenge here. Nihal's move, though, curious how he's leveraging the match situation in his favor.
Yeah, the move knight e1 might feel strange, but the knight wants to reroute, in some cases to simply d3, but also to expose the bishop. The bishop on g2 wants to look at that diagonal. There are some tactics involving the d pawn moving, whether it's capturing or moving forward, and the bishops look at each other on that diagonal. b4 might appear to be a very tempting move, hitting the knight, but of course that knight doesn't have to just retreat back to a6. We can then exchange on d2 or c3 and bring the knight into e4 as well. So I'd be looking at b4. I'd be looking at knight d3, especially given the match situation and knowing that I can kind of trade some pieces here and look to play to liquidate.
Yeah, this move I was looking at, and you mentioned the knight going to e4 because a6, it's too far away from the game,
Yeah,
doesn't have a path back in the game. Maybe more importantly, knight e4 does invite some trades, but the trade we're talking about, you can trade dark squared bishops. That's one thing. You can take on e4 with the bishop, and I don't mind White's position there, but the Fianchetto, without the Fianchetto bishop, Nordebek's thinking, hey, those light squares, that king can be something I can play against. Even if it's a worse position,
yeah,
you've weakened your king side a little bit, and that's the imbalance I'm willing to live with.
exactly. And we see the first part of that. Um, Okay, takes on e6. The knight on e1 will probably join the game via
So,
g2.
how do the tactics work? Queen take. Oh no, never mind. Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah,
I was
knight
just
g2,
looking
knight
at the queen
e3.
trade.
Queen trade looks, I mean, you never really want to liquidate that much, but the nice thing for Nodirbek is I guess there's a little bit of time that White has to spend activating the knight. So, you can live with that.
Yeah, this seems like a smart move. I was looking at queen trades where black gets the d file first, but
Yeah,
in some queenless positions, just imagine the queens are off. Rook is on c2, right? Knight goes to g2, e3. Feels like white has some stability there
that's
for
right.
an endgame where even the d file wouldn't be enough to claim too much. So I agree with the decision. Keep the queens on the board. For pressuring Nihal. Position was just too easy to play with the queens off in white's. And I think white, long term, you'd like to look at that bishop on b7 and make sure it doesn't activate.
Right.
So does that mean we still play this knight g2, knight e3 move, which centralizes the knight, but importantly blockades the bishop?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or do we
I
put
think
another piece
we
there?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
maybe the queen could be good there, or knight c2 allows for queen d4, just to challenge the black queen there. And meanwhile, we can try to open things up on the c file, maybe c5, try to use the rook a little bit. It feels stable, definitely for Nihal. He's used a lot of time here, and look, we can talk about how equal the position is, but it's highly imbalanced. If we're thinking about what you wanted to achieve with the black pieces from the opening, I feel like Nordebek's got absolutely everything he could want. He has a light squared bishop. There's light squared weaknesses around White's king. The pawns are not remotely symmetrical. The queens are still on the board. I think you can be happy.
Yeah, and we're talking about the knight coming to e3, but black has the f file. So if I put the knight on e3, that's fine. But the piece on, the rook on c3, the queen on d2, if black can generate, double rooks on the f file, you see some positions the queen can encroach, whether it's g4, h3, and it just feels like things are a little bit tender. Maybe in some positions, the queen is on h3 when the knight is on e3, that black can then look to rook
Yeah.
lift and target h2. Something on the king side feels like that is a vehicle for black to target. The c5 move that you mentioned has been played. Good news for Nodirbek is yes, it's a challenging move to open up the c file, give white's rook on c3 some purpose. On the other hand, that is another potential diagonal for the bishop on b7. If it's blocked on its current diagonal, let's say the knight reaches e3, it might have a6 now in some positions,
Yeah.
and ca h3 if you don't find any success on a6. So yeah, for a must-win game, I think you're completely right that Nordebek has really the imbalance, got the clock advantage to work with.
There's something about the rooks doubling on the f file that really ties white up. If you play knight e3, I don't know that I like allowing queen h3 and the potential down the h file. If you leave the knight on g2, you can't really move the rook from f1, and you're not playing with your full army of pieces. It feels like the knight on g2 and the rook on f1 are more or less out of the action, and small moves like even g5 restricts the knight on g2. H5, h4, if the knight goes to e3, pries open the king some more. So I think Nordebek's got everything he wants. He's got a time advantage, tons of imbalances. I think he can be very happy. Eric, I was just looking at the other game, maybe the two board split as well, just to check in. But honestly, the reason we have gone there is there's not a lot to check in on. Cena Movahed is down a minute. He just doesn't really have a lot here, but the queens are still on the board, and he still has a bishop against a knight. It's just the pawn structure, Eric, is so symmetrical.
Yeah, and when have we seen Lazovic misplay those positions? That's the
Yeah,
thing. He he loves it. He's world class. He's held everyone, Magnus, Hikaru. He gets those equal end games and equalizes, and he's just a very classical play. His root is just
yeah.
strategically very strong. Nordebek's game definitely feels like the one where look what's happening. There's a bunch of pawns for black pushing down the center. We mentioned doubling rooks on the c file. Everything black could want in a must-win game, sorry, excuse me, has occurred except for the breakthrough. He's only a
Well,
couple moves away from that breakthrough of d4 e3.
I was actually gonna say the game on the left here is probably a good example of one of the tougher spots to be in a must win. This hasn't gone in any direction you'd want as white. The knights are encroaching. It's actually Dennis doing exactly what you predicted just now, outplaying world class in these symmetrical positions where you're just maneuvering pieces. Granted, it's also easy to maneuver knights compared to bishops. Bishops, they kind of have their good squares and that's it. Whereas knights can keep hunting and finding better ones. So what I'm seeing from Dennis with the black pieces is he's not just even looking to equalize. He's playing to force material off the board for an easy draw from a position of strength.
For sure. I want to mention the Nihal game because I think Nihal played what I would suggest the practical decision. Sack the exchange. You get a pawn as well, but break up those pawns and say, you know what,
Yeah,
in this end game, I can hold it because you just couldn't risk that bishop and the pawn and center pushing through. I think this is a practical decision. He's definitely worse. The rook is definitely versus a
Yep.
knight and pawn, the one with the advantage, but it's much easier to play for white than before. I think you'd like to put the rook on c1,
Yes.
move the king up to g2 to f3, and then say, hey, that e3 pawn, I'm going to pick it up with the king without compromising my pawn structure. My other pieces defend themselves.
Yep, and you can use the B pawn as a bit of an offering. Just throw it up the board as
Wow.
needed. Yeah, and look how
Look at the
aggressive
speed
black
that
is going to
was.
be.
G5 immediately takes, doesn't think at all. Wow.
He expected it. This prevents king g2, king f3, and I completely understand it. I was going to say if the king got to f3, white would sack the b pawn, win the c pawn, and as soon as you win that c pawn, I feel like you believe in the draw. But with the c
Yep.
pawn on the board, it is the only pass pawn in the position for black. That's a tough one to deal with.
Yeah, it's a funny position now because what would you play as white if it was your move next?
I think I would play king g4 and
Yep.
sack the pawn and play king f3 because that's how much I want to get rid of that pawn. But I agree. You can second guess yourself. I don't even know if king g4 is the best move, but I would play it because I'm practically scared of being stuck on h3 with no progress.
Yeah, it's so nice that white still has that B pawn. At the right moment, you mentioned, you give it up.
Exactly right. King g7. I mean, king g6, king takes g5 is going to happen if white does absolutely nothing. There is knight d5 targeting every single pawn in the position. He's trying to free the king with king g3.
Mhm.
We see the blue arrow because that immobilizes the pieces completely. Rook c4 here, Eric. That's
Well,
actually really annoying to deal with.
he was worried about B6, right?
Yeah, I guess I thought he would go back, but knight d5 comes in and it's a mess.
H3,
Yep.
rook. The other rook goes to C4. So knight D5, maybe by far the only move.
I guess you win the pawns here. E3 is hanging, c5 is hanging. The rooks need to stay connected, so the
There's
rook
no
can't
check.
take on b5, and there's no
Yeah,
check.
This is a good find. So rook C4, he's found it. Rook G to C4. There's a lot to calculate here. And is the move like rook G1? Where do we place the rook on the A file? No, he just trades. Black's probably
Okay.
playing what? Rook C1,
Yeah, there's no rook
rook
b4,
C1.
so you have to get around to catch that pawn.
Rook C2 or rook C1? I can't tell. There we go.
My instinct is to move the rook further so the c pawn has more room, but it's all about this c pawn. You get rid of that, the draw is within reach. But remember, the draw can't be some situation where you have rook against knight. You'll get flagged.
I think I see one of Nihal's plans here to play king D3 and then knight C3. Take away rook B1 and also shield and allowing
Right.
the king to step over and support that passed pawn.
Right.
King,
Well, we're
king,
gonna
yeah,
see it.
king D3, knight C3. Nodirbek has to choose. Does he take the G5 pawn or does he walk his king, try to walk it over and stop the B pawn? The timing might not work out.
No, I think you have to commit to the queen side here because if you wanted to take g5, it was hanging before.
Yeah,
Knight c3, king d6, catching that pawn.
that's huge. I think that's the most efficient way of playing it because look at white's pieces. It's a king and a knight and they're centralized, which means if you can use your black king, stop the B pawn, that rook is free to roam and pick off the pawns on the queen side. The king side, like H2.
Okay, so he's doing kind of the opposite. Now he's going to the other side of the board. This is why this endgame is so tricky because you have to keep switching sides.
As you mentioned, Nodirbek needs to keep at least one pawn.
Yes.
Well, actually, he is up on time, so we could
So
see
what
some
about
flagging.
king f5? And if you go save the b pawn, then maybe you go king g4. The problem is white is now, I think, prioritizing taking the h pawn and then bringing all the forces back to collect the c pawn.
Yeah, the only move you can play here is rook takes b6, walking into that fork.
Yep. Knight d7 check. Very tricky.
King f5 feels like it should work intuitively, but
King f5, knight
it's just
takes
not an
h7.
intuitive endgame. You do have to calculate.
Okay, knight takes h7. Rook takes h4. I'm feeling this feels a lot more drawn than winning to me, and it's not just the evaluation. It's that I feel there's so many pawns to deal with that I couldn't possibly hang on to my c pawn. But I do think that Nodirbek can find a way to get sort of a rook against knight and pawn situation and play for a potential flag. I feel like that might be the best option at this point. And it's still
Agreed.
tough to achieve.
And there's one risk as well for white to get that knight trapped. Sometimes knight versus rook.
Yeah.
So it is on h7. It's supported, but you have to watch out.
Yeah, we'll bring the two boards up. Eric has, just time pressure all over the place. But the thing is, we knew that Dennis was just in control of that position. He wanted to catch the result coming in, but Cena he couldn't find enough in that game to make something happen in terms of a significant edge. Let's have a look now. We'll focus on this Nodirbek game, but the result is in. Dennis does win that matchup. However, must-win territory for Nodirbek. He might not be able to get it done on the board, Eric. Knight g5 played huge opportunity miss for white, but he's thinking about the draw. Nodirbek is thinking about the flag.
Yeah, he has to take every pawn off the board and just start checking that king, pinning the knight.
G7, king f7. Pawns are disappearing.
Yep, that's one pawn down.
Mm-hmm. Can't
But
take
this
the
is
knight,
annoying.
obviously.
You can take the knight even if you allow white's king to cross, white's king will defend the knight.
That's right.
King d5. Because you can queen.
He's just
This
going to
is
leave
really
the knight
well
there.
done. Yeah, you can just leave the knight there.
Still, 15 seconds, Eric. Not a lot of time. There's no progress for white. At some point, it becomes very tempting to move it.
50 moves he needs, right?
Look at that. Tricky.
Oh, wow. He's catching up on the clock.
He's done a really good job. E6 is a threat.
If the rook vacates, you're right. E6.
Yep. Nodirbek has done a phenomenal job here.
Nihal's got to start pre-moving. What is he doing here?
Oh, he's going to win it on time. Is Nihal, wondering what happened there. Oh, we had more moves.
Yeah, and they're still playing. 2-3.
And Nihal gets rid of it. That's a draw. Oh my goodness. Okay, made more sense that there was some lag there.
Look at that, Amon. Nihal is so fast. He was down a bunch. He was getting flagged. He played that so well.
He's he's one of the best in the world in a pure time scramble. His speed is seriously unmatched. Nodirbek looked like he was getting it done. There's no way that Nihal spent that time. So that was just time made up. And he actually did get that done. He got it done for a win, by the way. He didn't even need the win, just showing off at that point. And Nihal, 2-0s, Nodirbek Abdusattorov in the losers quarterfinals to move on and face Denis Lazovic. And this is a huge matchup upcoming, Eric, because Nihal is effectively the only player remaining in the event that has not qualified, right? You have Magnus, you have Duda, you have Lazovic. If Lazovic wins, it's not like Nihal just gets the spot. That's not how it works. It goes to the leaderboard where obviously he would have a great chance to qualify there, but it's just not guaranteed. You want to guarantee it, you got to get the match win against Denis Lazovic. But what a way to start with 2-0 right there, Eric.
Yeah, and just showing like his mouse abilities are so strong. Like one of the best bullet players and pre-move anticipation. Some of those esports traits we talk about, extracting every half point. He's got that. I mean, that was incredible. That was such a tough position to play. I'm sure a lot of audience members, you've been flagged before. You're down 5-10 seconds. Your opponent starts checking you over and over. And we've seen a couple times already that Nihal is really good at using his king, using his pieces, and consistently blocking, pre-move anticipation, just world-class right there, that end game.
Amazing. And Nihal moves on, but we have another match coming up, a short break for ourselves and for the players to get set up for that one. But before we go to the break, a word from Zenny. That's right, Zenny. One of the best parts about them is the variety. They've sold 51 million frames from the classic professional looks. They've also got the bold modern styles, and to make it easy, of course, they have the virtual try-on feature. Lets you test out thousands of frames from your home. You can see exactly how they look on your face before you buy them. You can go around and play with it at go.chess.com/Zenny. Use the try-on feature, find a pair that fits your vibe, and code CHESS for 15% off everything through May 1st. !Zenny in chat to get started. Right now, you can win 1 of 10 custom gift bags they're giving away as well, featuring their blue light glasses. Click the link in the pinned chat message to enter Nihal against Denis Lazovic, the Chess.com Open. The playoffs continue. Nihal fighting for that final EWC qualification spot after this.
I think the Speed Chess Championship in 2024 against Alireza is close to the best that I can play, at least that format. It's rare to have days where I just feel my best, but that was one of them. Honestly, I would say that I was probably more focused on fitness when I was a bit younger. Now I probably try and win my games a little bit quicker, not sit there for that long. But I think back in those days, I tried working out. And it's really important to have a good chair to be comfortable. Like, I like to lean back, recline a bit. We put some strain on our bodies in that way by sitting for so long. So having good tools to help us is really big. Oh. This is what I like the best. Also, you have a gamer leaning forward emoji, which I prefer, but yeah, I also like leaning a bit back and forth. A nice little rest we have here too. That sounds good to me. I'm always interested in finding out what's good and what's new.
Folks, have you ever looked at me and thought, oh my gosh, he's so handsome? Thanks. It's probably the glasses. You see, I've worn glasses for most of my life, and in recent years, I've been wearing Zenni. Zennis are affordable, reliable, and they offer thousands of options. Also, nowadays, most of us spend hours staring at a screen, whether big or small. So I add blocks, which are Zenni's blue light blocking glasses. And remember to get your eyes checked regularly and avoid straining them for too long. But as far as glasses go, I love my Zennis, and you can try some today at zenni.com/chess. And maybe you too will look as handsome in yours as I do in mine.
The totem holds the moments that defined champions. Plays that became history.
Absolutely nothing. The old horn! Baby's a goal!
Across years, across games, across the world. The roar of the crowd. The winning play. The heartbreak. Moments that turned players into champions.
Trying to be feeding through here. He gets broken.
Moments that never fade.
Is it going to be good? Yes, it is! And Weibo will...
As echoes of the past grow distant, the next chapter begins. A new challenge unfolds. Who will define history? Who will rise above?
It's 2 a.m. Stop the tilt.
Clear the board. Buy yourself time. Magnet.
Pull every shield your way! Royal Frenzy! How long can you survive? Come on, the board's waiting!
This is the Esports World Cup, and in 2026, we're raising the bar again. For 7 weeks starting in July, over 2,000 players from more than 200 clubs will compete in 24 game titles. And with a life-changing prize pool exceeding $75 million, the club championship stakes have never been higher. The club with the most points will be crowned as the best esports club in the world, taking home an incredible $7 million grand prize. But that's not all. With over 300 plus activations taking place across the event, the Riyadh Boulevard will become a must-visit destination for families, friends, and fans alike. EWC is where players become legends, fans become a part of history, and the best rise above. See you this summer at the Esports World Cup 2026.
Welcome back, everyone. Our coverage of the Chess.com Open continues, and we're slowly whittling down, Eric, the players. We started at nearly 1,600, and Magnus Carlsen, Jan-Krzysztof Duda, they're laying in wait for their potential opponents. It's going to be these two players right here. Only one goes forward. Denis Lazovic on the left side of your screen, Nihal Sarin on the right. Eric, this match it's for the prize money. You know, there's a $5,000 difference between the two places here, fourth and third, but it's also for that coveted EWC direct qualification spot. Denis Lazovic already has one. Nihal Sarin is fighting for one. He's the only person remaining in this competition who can earn one, and he needs to take out Denis Lazovic in this best of two matchup. We're just getting started.
Yeah, I think for players like Nihal Sarin in the past, you had to beat guys like Yukaro Magnus. You still do. But Denis has established himself as a real problem in these events. To win these events, you have to take down Denis, and very few people have shown they can do that over a long period of time. The good news here, just a 2-game match. You've seen Denis in a couple tough spots, although consistency is what I think about. Denis Lazovic's chess, positions he gets, the clock management. Nihal, that time scramble we just saw, again, I see that and I'm like extremely impressed what he did against Abdusadarov a few minutes ago. But how do you get those imbalances or those positions against Denis Lazovic? He doesn't give you much space. He closes down positions, liquidates the right time, very practical player, becoming more well-rounded, which means he can play against different styles and matchups more effectively.
Yeah, completely agree. It's a skill that I go so far as to say you need to have, but it's certainly a nice to have in this esports format. I do think that, Seoul Esports, they really got a great signing in Nihal, because I think he just fits the mold of what the event actually is, and the skills that are unique to the new format that he absolutely has.
I'm taking a look at this position, and there's an imbalance on the board already. Black's has the bishop pair. White has a more favorable pawn structure because of those doubled F pawns. So something that Denis likes to play with, a good structure, kind of that end game pull where it's like, you know what, if I can trade off pieces and I envision what this position will look like in an endgame,
Yep.
I'm generally better there. So it gives him that extra condition, that the leverage trade off. I think Nihal, he wants to keep pieces on the board and then balance it for sure.
Not an easy decision immediately posed here with knight to h4 because, knight g6, that's a bishop pair given away. And might even, I was going to say, Eric, you were highlighting bishop c8, might even consider going all the way back. And it seems crazy, but at the same time, the knight on h4 is not well placed, right? The knight coming back to f3, then you might see the bishop go back. So that's why we see queen c2 played. So now when the knight goes back to f3, f5 square is not available.
For sure. And one of the plans for black here, I mean, this structure is pretty well known. It comes from even like the Trompovsky opening. Black often plays g6, f5. It's one way to play it, and brings the knight over to f6. Here, this is a bit different. The knight goes to a6, to c7, fights for those center squares, maybe e6 as well. I'm a little surprised Nihal maybe didn't go for the more standard one, but he has something in mind with that knight because in the long run, white at some moment would maybe like to play e4 and grab more of that center. You just have to find that fine line between not giving black's bishops more room to work with.
Yeah, the pawns on dark squares restrict the dark square bishop, so playing e4 is always a big decision. And I think it was this unusual setup, queen c2, knight h4, the move g6, you could also consider taking it. And taking on g6 with the queen, and suddenly the black king is in a funny spot. So it's almost like this setup was directly against the idea of g6 and f5. So it caused Nihal to maybe adapt a5, knight a6, knight c7, and go for something different with bishop e6.
Yeah, that g6 line was nice. This position, though, Aman, is where we get the structure that you normally go for as black. You just have to spend a little bit more time. This knight now will likely go to f6, king to g7 on the dark squares, avoid the pin, because where it is on c7 is kind of controlled by the light squared bishop. e5, right. a6, d5, e6. The bishop is pointing there. White can take in some lines or just add easy pressure. Feels like the knight on f6 plays against it. And yeah, king g7. If Nihal is playing the position for a bit of pressure, he has that opportunity with h5, h4 maybe, and you see that the bishop, king on g7, rook on h8, sometimes you can drum up something over there.
Yeah, the other thing is the move d5 becomes potentially tempting for white. It simplifies a lot, but sometimes in these positions, it's really annoying to play opposite bishops where the dark squared bishop for black, what is it attacking? Really nothing. G3 pawn, E3 pawn, very well supported. The bishop for white attacks f7, and that's just a long-term target. If the pawn was on e6 for black, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but white can build up and attack a square that black's bishop can't defend. That's the one thing about opposite bishops. When one side has a target, there's this whole piece, the bishop for black, that cannot participate in defense. So Dennis is, he's not got the biggest advantage with d5, but if everything trades, I think the position from a practical perspective is very easy and 100% risk-free to play.
Yeah, that 2 result, that risk-free play, definitely Dennis and a lot of players like that. And you mentioned this opposite endgame, not too comfortable in some lines, which is why Nihal is inviting an imbalance here, potentially after queen e7, which was played in the game, and take here and argue the structure. Those pawns are now split, they're isolated, and you see Dennis immediately pull the bishop back, to reroute it to g2, shelter the king, fianchetto the bishop, and just get sustained pressure on c6.
Yeah, rook a c1, knight a4. I'm expecting knight a4 probably right away. Yep, and rook a c1 next. There's pressure. That's all we can say. The advantage is not significant, but it's visible. We can see these split pawns here for black. And if you could get some sort of stability in white's position, rook d2, rook d1, rook a c1, you start to have easy targets. That's why h5 has been played. If you do play the move h4, suddenly the position becomes a little bit more tender. There's even ideas like bishop takes c3 in a lot of lines, knight g4, knight takes e3. The whole structure can come undone. So in turn, he's allowed the move h4, but you already talked about king g7, rook h8. we're likely going to see those ideas on the board.
Yeah, I think one key part of the position is the c6 pawn. Nihal had the option. Do I defend it passively? No, he's like, no, you can take it. I get counterplay on the king side. I'd rather fight for the initiative, because you make a move like rook c8, rook f8, and you're kind of saying, yeah, I'm going to have passive defense. And then if I start to attack, I'll probably have to move my rook all the way back. Well, as soon as I said that, he does play rook c8. I wasn't sure if he's going to commit even more with king g7 on the h file. He's like, I want to find that balance. Yes, I'll play h5, h4, because that's a pawn I can just throw and chip away at white's king, but I don't want to give up the pawn too easily. I want white to maybe lose coordination if white does want to win that pawn.
And I was going to say,
are there tricks here?
He hasn't actually given up the idea, right? He's gone rook c8 to defend, but it's very temporary. King g7, he can swing over with rook h8 immediately, and I'm sure he will. We're probably going to see all of these sacrificial ideas take place. Rook h8, knight g4, queen g5, and the queen can slide over to h5, to h6, using the h-file. This is a position which is starting to get a little bit scary, and I'm actually looking at the move c5 and feeling, why didn't we just give that up? Rook h8, knight g4 looked like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's why I've been a bit confused or missed some of the moves. Rook c8 didn't feel like, and c5, that does feel like passive defense. Now c5 is captured by the knight, and the knight is a piece I would like to centralize, bring back into the game. You saw Dennis, he just played rook c2. All the pieces are on light squares, avoiding that dark squared bishop.
Yep.
But he did miss an opportunity maybe to play b4 and just trade and win the pawn very, very comfortably.
If you take that move back and just put b4 on the board, it's kind of instructive. Of course, the pin, let's say a takes. Even if black now realizes, I'm in a pin, I can't take this pawn, I play rook h8, it's a lot different to now have the pawn on a3 join the b file, join the c file. That's way more dangerous, and that's probably a pretty significant opportunity missed.
If nothing happens on the h file, you have to favor white a bit here, because c5, that will be an extra pawn. The good thing for Nihal, and I think part of the reason he's willing to now be like, I'm losing the c5 pawn for sure, is after a move like rook takes c5, sometimes there might be tactics on b2 where you're overloaded, but the rooks on the c file don't have rook c7, so black can still play down a pawn without white crashing through or forcing, his way on the c file. The bishop does a really nice job of covering the vulnerable 7th rank while targeting b2, g3, opposite bishops, makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, we see knight c5, and this move comes with a few ideas. Queen d1, bishop takes g3 you're highlighting. Knight b7 might look tempting, but there is that queen d1 move to get out of the fork. And I think the knight was actually trying to go to d3 next. Knight d3, maybe knight f4. So I like that this move stops knight d3. And the blue arrow, this is a critical moment, because black has a few ideas here. You're starting to really get the knight g4, bishop takes g3 stuff, and bishop f3 found and played by Dennis in a critical moment.
Yeah, it covers the d1 square. In some positions as black, when you're already committed to attacking, you might want to play g5, g4. The problem, oh wow, bishop takes g3. Let's calculate. fg3, that's a piece sacrifice, but I'm trying to find the whole line. You play knight b7 here?
Yeah, that was my first thought. Is knight b7 the idea? Because usually when a strong player plays bishop g3 so quickly, they're probably correct about a decent part of the calculation, which is just that the position is tough to play. And I think he's more going for that, Eric, than an actual on the board raw calculation that he's justifying this. I think this is a practical sacrifice.
It's a practical sacrifice. It helps that there's no more immediate exchanges. Black's goal, keep the queen on the board. Maybe now we'll see the rook jump to the h file since white's king is open. But we're definitely anticipating a move for Dennis that threatens a queen trade, forces the queen back towards, let's say, e5. And that's why queen f2 is probably being suggested. We see that blue arrow. Queen g2 threatens the queen trade, but here you defend e3 because you're anticipating Nihal keeps the queens on the board, queen e5, and you don't want to lose e3. The last pawn.
I was going to say you could play rook d4 using the queen on f2 as a defensive piece, not only in e3, but d4 as well. And it's so frustrating because, I mean, there's a number of ways you could continue here, but rook to b6, if you want to keep the rook on the board, I could play b3. I don't even need
Knight
to
d3 is probably
defend
the
the move.
the, the
Knight
move
d3 is
now.
really nice.
That's why rook d4 also shelters, and yeah, rook b6, keeping the pieces. I think that makes so much sense. But knight d3, everything is defended, and you free up the c file for the rook.
Yeah, unfortunately, queen f2 was multi-purpose, defending e3, x-ray defending the d4 square. You just cannot afford to trade pieces there. And Nihal's
d4
approaching
maybe?
a position where it is just a full piece down.
It's a full piece down. I'm wondering, is Nihal with queen e7 preparing knight e4? You'd like to open up the f file, access to the king. So this move plays against it. No time for knight e4, because at the end of that line, White's knight goes to d5 and forks the queen and the rook. Dennis is playing a tough position very well. Tough, being up a piece isn't tough, but the fact of the matter is this king is a bit more open, and Nihal's just playing for practical chances.
Yeah, there's not really any danger anymore. You're just trying to target the b pawn as black and trying to avoid trades, but I just
trading so well right now.
Yeah, I just don't see how it's possible.
You probably should take the next pawn on a5. That's one thing. It's nice to have that passed a pawn with a light squared bishop on the queening square. But Dennis, first job, what is Nihal planning to play after rook takes a5? What's the counterplay? I don't want to take it if it gives black something very fun.
Yeah, rook c8, trying to play rook c1. You can't play rook c2 because the b2 pawn would drop. I feel like that's what I would be considering.
Yeah, finding that open lane for black's rooks. Wonder if you ever throw in a4 at some point, just to fix the pawn here.
So I think that Dennis has gone full. Yeah, rook b3 is coming. He's going full defense. I'm expecting bishop g2, queen f4, queen d4, and he's just going to hunt around for those trades.
Yeah, that's nice. Getting the queen to d4 threatens the trade and just improves the queen position and just leverages the fact that you're up a piece. You can take b2 right now, but as you highlighted, and he
this
has
would be a full. So I think, yeah, if rook b2, everything trades followed by queen d4 check. And also nice to know the a pawn and the bishop on g2 are the correct color on the a8 square. Feels like almost, crazy that I'm even mentioning that now. I know Robert Hess, when he does commentary, he's always calling that out seemingly way too early. Shout out to Robert. But it's such a great thing to notice, and often it empowers you to play certain variations because of that.
This queen on d4 really is a problem for Nihal. If you move the rook, the queen's trade. If you move the queen, that rook is pinned, so there's no good way of dealing with it.
Yeah, g5 looking for f4 with pressure on the rook on e2. The nice thing is white is 100% winning if you lose the e-pawn, but everything gets traded because of that outside pass pawn. It makes all the difference.
Nice calculation I'm on here, right? Rook takes c3. That's a valuable pawn, but I think you have rook takes f5. You don't want to face 3 connected pawns, even if white has the piece and the b pawn. Here, not possible.
Yeah, you can face those 3 pawns, but only if you trade all the other pieces. If there's rooks on the board, I think it's a little bit too tricky.
Does e4 work here? This is a better way of doing it. g4, you can just take it.
That's right. Yeah, rook to e4.
e4 now is a threat? Maybe not. I have to calculate. But
what about rook e4 and then take on f6 with the rook and try to say, okay, I'm going to win one of those pawns there. And we have g4.
Yeah. Oh, that looks good. There's a move here probably, but it's an idea.
Yeah, queen e7 played. So he really is trying to avoid the queen trade. I thought there might have been a way to allow it, but...
Can you play e4 here, though? What's the response after e4?
That looks incredibly strong.
The pawn is pinned. The rook allows bishop takes f5.
No, that's a very good move, Eric. And very good moves like that Denis Lazovic tends to spot them when they're in the position. That's too strong to deal with.
Yeah, this bishop takes. If f5 collapses, everything falls. Those rooks are stacked up, and
yeah, no, he's giving up material because I truly don't see a better option.
you can move your queen back to e3 to block the pawn and kind of
cool.
centralize.
Queen d6, it looks tempting, and then there is e3, which is kind of funny. You get the queen trade, but yeah, you lose a rook.
I know you like your queen trades.
Yeah, I had to look at queen d6, but I think I proudly say I might be able to resist that one. It's threatened now, though. That's okay. Oh, come on, that's too easy for me. Queen d6.
I want to see how Nihal plays this, though. He's so tricky. Lazovic handles that very well, but the pawns are intimidating. The game's not fully over yet. On a good day, Black would need to play e3 and get his king on f3 and go for something on the back rank. Not enough time here, but he's trying, and that's the format.
As white, you have this like pattern up the board.
Rook h6 in some lines I'm on.
So maybe rook c5 check, because if the king goes up the board, you have rook b4 check. And then rook takes the pawn on g5. That's what I'm trying to do here. Also, the king cannot go backwards because rook c6. So that line feels pretty good to me.
Nihal's walking the king over. No, it definitely looks like the right line. But at least Nihal's forcing him to find those lines.
Yep, absolutely.
Rook h6 is Black's only chance. Look at how Lazovic is playing this.
Yeah, well, we're going to see e2 and g4 probably. The only way to keep things connected.
King up or king e1? King up, right?
It feels like king e1 avoids a potential g4, g3. So I might
Rook c6 was his plan. Oh, rook e3. I'm not predicting.
So can you go rook h6 here? It feels like the attempt.
Oh, rook b4. We see the blue arrow forces the king to a worse square, and g4 is loose.
Yeah, well, you just take it. I mean, this is, it has to be said, quite well played from Denis. Despite my opinions on how winning it was, actually converting it is quite a different story. I think he did an expert job there, and I think a lot of us, happy to put myself in that group, would not have executed rook versus those three pawns as handily as he did there. That was a very clean conversion and a win in the first game for Denis Lazovic.
Yeah, those pawns are intimidating, but Denis just is so hard to crack. Where are the blunders? Where are the mistakes? Doesn't feel human sometimes.
No, it's really amazing to watch Denis in those technical positions. It's like bishop takes g3. Nihal went for that sacrifice. I don't think that it was the smartest sacrifice, but he felt the position was just becoming like a stranglehold for Denis. And that's just a credit to how Denis has played them and his pedigree for playing those positions. He sort of gets that respect from players. You get a bit more desperate, and Nihal did with bishop g3. And within 3 moves, I felt the whole idea of bishop takes g3 was neutralized.
It was, and you mentioned the pedigree, the respect. It's well earned, but it puts pressure on the players when you end up playing Denis Lazovic and you think, what openings do I play? Which positions? You really want to avoid dry technical positions because he's a complete machine there. But then that forces you to make what we just saw, decisions like that, sacrificing a piece when it's not so sound. Just this pressure. It's almost, even something like you think about a guy like Magnus, that aura a bit as well of how well he plays some slightly better positions that you just want to avoid, and forces you to think sometimes a bit irrationally.
I have to ask the obvious here. I'm a guy following a blue arrow. So let's take the move back there. Is it really possible to have a double question mark so early in the opening? Does this have to do with achieving f5 in the position?
It must, I think. Yeah. I mean, rook e2 is usually how white would play. I mean, rook f1, you might feel bad. You have to move back and you didn't really gain anything. I'm guessing it has to do with f5 here.
Right. But I wouldn't expect a double question mark. It just almost looked like routine moves, but the engine is just saying, like, "Oh, this is an unbelievable mistake." So yeah, just I don't think I've seen an E45 position with such a critical blunder. The players obviously just kind of overlooked it. They weren't expecting it either. So kind of an odd moment there where moves were obviously played out of order.
That's right. With these E45 positions, there's so many like nuances. It's annoying as a player because we see right here the players. Dennis doesn't miss things too much, but just playing with so many lines, at some point the players have the approach. I'm just playing the system.
Mhm.
I think every single move. That's not the type of time management I want during the
That's
game.
right.
Get into the middle of the game I'm comfortable with, and then start thinking.
Well, we're back in a position that's a bit more standard, but nevertheless, I also got the feeling that Nihal wanted to play in a specific way that maintained pieces on the board, and it looks like he's done that because of something specific. Like he's given something up by playing Bishop C2, Eric, but it really was a critical moment.
Yeah, let's
So
take a
I feel
look at
like,
it.
yeah, let's
We
take a
figured it
look.
out.
We have some time, Eric. What was the line that actually was possible?
So I was saying rook e2 is what players would play because rook f1, you feel stupid, quite frankly, and black will then get the initiative. You play rook e2 to at least, say my rook has improved, and then you run into bishop takes f2 check. And the point being, rook takes f2. Do we take back? No, two pieces for rook. That's enough.
Oh,
Knight here, and
and
you can go
so
further.
we have to.
Knight takes. Okay, you win the piece back. But
You
where
think your
does the
knight's
rook
trapped,
go?
and it's
Also,
the
then
rook
this
is
comes
trapped.
in.
Wow. That is, I feel like that's a really cool thing to just see once because uh, it's probably something that could actually happen. I mean, we're seeing guys at the absolute top of the game just, accidentally allowing it, but the coordination does not work out for white there. And that would have been just lights out, right? That's a knockout. You see that on the board from Dennis, you start to question things. That would
You
be
know, it's
brutal.
funny. I played Nihal in Kazakhstan at the World Rapid and Blitz, and I beat him with that trick. He made an opening mistake in that structure, so I'm a bit surprised the players missed it. It happens in some Philidor and Peart's positions where
Right.
you can get your knight in.
Trapped
I got it on
pieces.
e6. So Nihal's fallen for that against me. I didn't beat him in a nice way. It was just an opening trick. So it's funny to see that same pattern. Easy to miss though,
Hmm.
because you're not actually looking for it.
Exactly. You
As
can
black,
never
especially.
assume. Yeah, imagine you're looking for that every single move. You'd be down minutes spending time calculating for no reason. So you have to know spidey sense when something feels off. And in this position, I know that the engine has sort of been championing Dennis's handling. But I think with ideas like G4, Rook D1 in the future, Queen F3. I don't know. I kind of like the imbalanced nature. It's
Which
really.
rook, by the way? Which rook do you put it on D1? Because
Oh,
I'm worried about losing
I'll
pawn on
play
E2.
A3. I'll respect Bishop A2 enough probably to play A3
Okay.
if I'm using the A rook. I agree. I agree.
Nihal has not played too ambitiously in this opening. I think Dennis is doing really well.
Hmm.
How to make progress is another story. Black considering F5, maybe grabbing more space or playing a bit more solid and saying, you know what? I've already pushed aggressively on the queen side, earned some squares there. I don't need to overextend. And Bishop C5 by Nihal, he'd love to get the knight there, just attacking this bishop that would be a bishop you would probably capture and say, you know what? It's a somewhat open position. At some point, my light squared bishop will become a better piece. So
Right.
we don't see the trade from Dennis centralizing that light squared bishop. Question is, does black ever play f5 here or f6? Probably not f6. You see this bishop on c2. If you weaken the light squares too much, at some moment, I can play d4 and maybe line my queen and bishop up for a battery.
Yeah. I don't know if G4 was a good move previously, but there's something I liked about just a few more pieces on the board. I think that Dennis's position has become slightly easier to play. There's this C5 hole in the position, which white is trying to make use of here and will. But as you mentioned, f5 is coming, and it's not clear what this bishop on c2 is doing without the d4 move. So if we don't achieve d4, I just feel like the piece is entirely out of the game.
Yeah, objectively, Dennis is doing very well. He has the center, he has the space, and we're not seeing White's counterplay yet. And this is a must-win game for Nihal.
Yeah, I was also gonna ask, like, what do we even think about the direct f4, f3 for black? So maybe that's why.
F3,
Yeah, I
but
think so. I think so.
out of necessity,
Yeah,
it takes away squares.
This isn't must win, Eric. You can play a3 as white. You can play f3. You can hold things back, but you're lacking space, and the only target is e5. You got a knight and a bishop. I'm not entirely sure where they're heading. We will see some maneuvers, but I think Dennis is in a position he feels extremely comfortable in.
Yeah, Dennis has the center, he has the space. So as white, your job is to try to undermine that center. The pawn on e5 can't be defended by another pawn. Black committed at f5. You'd like to get pressure here. You could triple on the file. It doesn't do anything, and you can't attack the knight on c6, so you can't undermine the defenders. So I just don't see the strategy of how Nihal. I think the strategy here is actually to shuffle, maybe a move like a3 you mentioned, rook e2, small moves, and honestly just prolong the game, because there's no way to force equalization, and you don't even want it sometimes because it's a must-win game. Can't allow too many trades and allow Dennis to play endgames. So I just think Nihal is honestly going to start shuffling and playing timid, natural moves, because the position doesn't allow him to play aggressively. Black is better situated for this.
That's right. Yeah, we will see a3. This is a move we've been waiting for. It allows the rook on a1 to finally move. It also keeps an eye on the b4 square. And the pawns on dark squares like that, it's not too bad. I'm a bit more concerned about the same configuration on the king side. h3, g2, f3, that's much weaker. And if black ever plays f4, you hand over the e4 square. And meanwhile, white's pieces are all guarding e4, so that's just not an option. Dennis himself, by the way, can also shuffle to improve. And he can do so knowing that Nihal is going to have to do something eventually, because the score right now is 1-0 for Denis Lazovic, and this is the second and final game before Armageddon. Nihal has to win.
Yeah, he has to win. I just don't see anything besides playing like rook e2, doubling up. There's this idea of c4, but it's such an ugly move. The point being, you kick away this bishop, you attack b5, and maybe a4 is loose, but you give up the d4 square. So I think Nihal is waiting for this knight to move. Problem is, the knight shouldn't move if you don't attack it. But if it does, you can envision a position for Nihal. Let's just say you double. This knight sometimes reroutes. Then you can play d4, open up everything. Obviously, Dennis will not allow that. But there's nothing white can do. White just does not have the space to operate with, and there's no breaks. c4 allows knight d4. So I really think the game plan here, objectively, is to admit your worst and keep the pieces on the board and get down to a minute, minute and a half, and then use those really strong mouse pre-move skills and shuffle and try to win on the clock.
I like king h8 because it calls out the shuffling. I might play g6. I was anticipating knight f1, knight e3, or knight g3 as probably the only and final shuffling maneuver. Maybe we could bring the knight to c2 to b4 if we want to eliminate the knight, but that's about it. Otherwise, as Dennis, I might play g6, king g7, and just back and forth, honestly. Force Nihal to find things.
If I'm Nihal, no trades. So bishop b1 would have been played immediately. And honestly, just start shuffling. I'm just curious how Dennis will approach that. If he sees it and he's like reading it, I need to start initiating trades. I don't want any of that. Or he's just like, you know what? You can do that. I'm comfortable with shuffling and letting the time go down a little bit. You won't have enough shuffling left by, let's say, 3 minutes. Let's say they burn a couple minutes. They could move 10, 20 times. You can find these different configurations, but it's still too early to fully commit to that.
That's right. I know we talked about the knight not moving, but knight d8 does cross my mind in order to maybe play c5, because the ideal position is if I could get the pawn from c7 to the c5 square with the knight back on c6. It's almost like just move the knight out of the way, c5, and move it right back.
I will play d4 in every position, whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
Once you play c5, there's no more chances.
Okay, bishop g6. I have to say, I'm not offended by
King g1.
g6. So I was
I'm,
expecting pawn g6, but okay, bishop g6 should be good enough.
I'm shuffling if I'm Nihal. He's up a minute now, Amon, though it has built up a bit. King
Yep.
g1. These
Back
are
on a
not
dark
impressive
square.
moves, but I'm just back on a dark square. I really, truly think shuffle, shuffle, build up the clock advantage. There we go. King g1 played.
You know, there's bishop a2, which you could do to sort of claim that diagonal. So maybe I set that up with a rook d2 move. We see knight a5. I think we're in the territory of c5 and knight back to c6. That will be really annoying.
D4 was, I said, you had to play it. He has agreed with that evaluation. Dennis won't complain about this because D4 will be a target, but you do see this bishop come to life.
Yep. I don't know if it was the right idea, but I really feel that if black had the bishop on f7 here and the pawn on g6, I'd feel a lot better dealing with the knight on g3 and the bishop on b1. There's something about that bishop on g6 that I don't love.
What did Dennis calculate here? Because this was a pretty forcing line. It was one of the main ones. And the calculation of, oh, bishop takes, knight takes, my queen's being hit, my pawn's being hit, isn't very deep. It's very immediate. It's all with check, it's all forcing. And if you don't take that, so yeah, I mean, knight a5, Amon, it looks, based on the position that was on the board, like Nihal's making serious progress.
Yep. He's up a lot of time for the circumstances here. I do think the knight on c4 is so powerful. It really is. But
that's nice.
Nihal cannot be upset. He's found something. He's got that pawn. He can try to make it work. But yeah, for Dennis, he has such a strong knight, Eric. I think it's more than enough compensation.
Yeah, I think the argument is like, let's just say white's up a pawn. It's let's bf pawn here. Nihal though will have to deal with the knight coming into c4 potentially, and just b2 being weak for the rest of the game. You can even check if you have a queen trade, knight c4, no way to defend, and white
nice one
loses that pawn. So then you start looking at moves like f4. But again, highest quality square is best piece.
Knight
I
c4,
guess knight c4, knight e3.
Knight e3. And knight takes b2 anyway? With queen f4?
That's a great find. That just forces everything off.
And you got to be careful. You don't take that knight. You know, he is doing the right thing. He's definitely playing the right style.
There's queen takes c5. So where you don't want to play queen d5.
No.
That's how you blunder. Queen f8. Not a pretty move, but looks like the correct move.
Beautiful.
You have to watch over that.
And you can play knight takes h6, but it's not good enough. I, again, agree with... I think it's just a really high-quality sequence here from both players. Dennis doing exactly what you need to do, and Nihal keeping things going, keeping pieces on the board, taking risks. A3 is loose here, but he's willing to say, okay, I have ideas with queen e6. Eventually, I can maybe bring that knight to e7. Should be enough for Dennis, but time will become a factor if you can keep the pressure on for a few more moves. Let's see.
Prophylactic move here. No, you're right. I mean, he's willing to lose a3. It's a must-win game. And the upside is, in some positions, the knight will be out of the game, allowing white to invade with the queen and weave something. I'm looking at king g3, queen e6, knight h4, knight g6. Just those light squares around black's king are very tender. Can Nihal find a way?
I think he has to start with king g3. That defends the pawn to enable the knight to move. You can try h4, h5. It just feels a bit slow, and you have control of g6 anyway, and you cannot defend a3. That's not the way you can play this game for white. You got to give it up. You got to go for something around the king and just see if it works. We see the evaluation bar, but have to try it.
That evaluation bar probably means there's a perpetual. There's compensation for white, but that means it's also very tricky for Dennis. He might have to find some only moves. We were looking at king g3. That's probably why queen f8 was played. He didn't like the idea of pawn grabbing on the queen side and allowing Nihal the full initiative.
What about going up the board? King g3, queen d3, king h4, queen d8, king h5.
I like it.
You know,
It says, black has is okay here, but I would not be comfortable at all allowing the
yeah.
king to come in.
That's difficult. So he's played king g3. I think he's comfortable with that because after queen d3 there's no other option. By the way, there's also g5 after queen d8, so you don't have to be as crazy with king h5 there, but it is an option. And the second you play knight a3, how many moves is that? Knight a3, knight c4, a3, a2, a1. I will be able to make a significant threat before then.
Yeah, knight d2, he wants to bring his knight in the game, and he's setting up a trick of, knight d6,
Ooh,
queen takes d6, and knight e4.
very
Without
crafty.
that trick, I'm wondering, I think he wants to free the b pawn, play b4, maybe use the a pawn to distract the
And
pieces.
again, queen d3, king h4, knight f3, king h5, and still the position survives. And you
no
have
more good checks. Yeah,
you have checkmate on g8.
I think this is very good from Dennis. Every line you've shown where he hunts the king, he puts his pieces out of position if they don't lead to checkmate. Here, he's leveraging once this a pawn, put it to a3, and force white to go backwards and respect that a pawn.
This is a distraction. Basically, white cannot keep the knight protected and involved, watch the a pawn, and keep the king safe from perpetual. That's Dennis's idea. There's 3 elements here. You can't keep them all under control at once.
Both players down to around a minute. Nihal sees the plan here. I wonder where he places the knight. If he wants to free up the queen from being overloaded, defending the a pawn and the knight on e7, he's got to find a good square for the knight here. Is it the check on g6?
Mm-hmm.
That's very tempting,
G6
but
and knight e5, for example, you could put the knight on e5 to defend d3. It just seems like a square you can maneuver later.
I was looking at knight e4 check, but maybe it's not too useful. I can just slide my king over to f3.
Right.
You don't have a great follow-up. The queen is so well placed on e6 for Nihal. Covers everything right now.
He is going to... So if you put the king on a light square, like, for example, knight d2, king g2, there's queen a8 and a2. And white, I never think white has enough because, unfortunately, queen f5... You think you're about to deliver the greatest fork of your life, but king g8 every time. Queen e6, king h7. You can't force that king to h8, which is so frustrating.
And Nihal trying to find a way here. He's down to 20 seconds, Amon.
I just don't
got to
see
go
the path
all in.
forward.
There is no way to win the queen. You're completely right. He just has, the problem is a2 is being threatened. G5, F5.
The reason that we're seeing this, Eric, is because it's a perpetual. That's why the engine is not concerned. And yeah, there you go. Unfortunately, he just couldn't find a way through. I credit Nihal for really leaving it all on the table there, Eric. And look at that side from Dennis. He knows that was a fight from a position that was full control. So Nihal made something happen. He's so tricky. But ultimately, Denis Lazovic getting it done with a win. And we can see from the bracket, Eric, what that means. He moves on, faces Duda in the loser's final. That match is upcoming today. And, unfortunately, what a phenomenal event for Nihal. He falls short in the loser's semifinal. But we have to say, Eric, that he will earn a significant amount of points towards the leaderboard for this performance. And I think still put himself in a phenomenal position to reappear at the EWC. He just does not have it 100% guaranteed.
Yeah, it's not the last we're going to see of Nihal. And even speaking about the match, it's a 2-game match. I think he's too frustrated with himself. Could have played better, 100%. But the way the format is, and a guy like Dennis, Nihal's going to be back. And the prize, $20,000, I think, is the 4th place prize, plus those valuable points you mentioned. Still a very, very successful weekend. And we're getting set up for the losers final, Duda and Lazovic.
That's right. John Krzysztof Duda, amazing first couple days of chess. Only fell to Magnus Carlsen, only in Armageddon. And now he's up against a surging Denis Lazovic, who just keeps getting over hurdle after hurdle, opponent after opponent. That match is upcoming here. It is still a best of 2, but we'd like to tell you guys about Chess Up 2 before we take our break. That's right. Chess.com is partnering with Chess Up to bring you the world's best-selling smartboard. You can play rated games on a real chessboard. You can use the built-in learning tools to improve, and you can turn on analysis to see Stockfish's evaluation of the position as you play. There's move feedback to get that live feedback on your inaccuracies and, of course, your brilliancies when you play them. All the settings are configurable to help anyone learn the game, improve, or just keep games balanced, some odds between friends. One of my favorite features, I tested that out actually with Anna Rudolph. And you can save 10% with code CHESS at playchessup.com. That's !ChessUp in chat to grab the deal. Guys, we are learning who is going to move on to face Magnus Carlsen in the grand finals. It all gets decided after this. Jan-Krzysztof Duda against Denis Lazovic in the Chess.com Open. We'll be right back.
Everybody has days where they just don't feel up for it. You look in the mirror and you're not your full self. Neurogum, energy and focus. I know a guy who uses the gum to help get ready for his day. And it tastes good. That's the energy and focus this guy needs to go bring smiles to the faces of chess pieces everywhere. There he is. That's my guy. Always forward, never back. Neurogum, helping little pawns feel big since 2015.
Yeah, it's extremely important for me because pretty much I have this is my only pass to qualify because I didn't play a lot of Title Tuesday events and I don't have enough Champions Chess Tour points, so that's the best possible way for me to qualify, and I will try my best. And I hope that if I show some good chess, then I'll have great chances. Well, I've played this time control last year in the EWC, and I can say that it's very, very interesting. I can say that it suits my style because in general for young players, it's I think it's a little bit advantage over more experienced, more mature players because I think in general young players do better in time scramble and manage the mouse skills better. Yeah, last year I did well, so this year I will try to repeat it and even improve it a little bit if I can. Yeah, this is great opportunity in general for top players to compete in this kind of different formats. It's like a challenge for me. I mean, specifically because earlier in the Vaikanze I gave an interview to Navi, and I mentioned that one of my big goals for this year is to do well in EWC, and so yeah, this is I'm very focused for that, and I'm ready to for this challenge.
Has this ever happened to you?
Oh, shoot. Another mouse slip.
What about this?
Oh, well, holy bishops en passant. I think I'm getting carpal tunnel. If only there was a way to play online chess with a real-life board.
What if I told you you can with Chess Up 2? That's right. With Chess Up 2, you can now play over the board online.
Wow.
Simply connect your Chess.com account to our state-of-the-art Chess Up 2 and get a game started. Every time you move, our revolutionary board will transmit the data online directly to your opponent. And as soon as they move, squares will light up, signifying which piece is going where.
Well, shucks. This Hikaru guy seems pretty good.
With Chess Up 2, mouse slips and sore wrists are a thing of the past.
My carpal tunnel is gone. Well, this sure is fun. I'm playing online against my new friend Hikaru. Who needs a family? But I sure do miss clicking on a piece and seeing all of my available moves like they have on Chess.com.
Well, Danny, you're in luck. This feature is totally available on the Chess Up 2 as well.
Wow. Well, I'm convinced. But hey, what if I don't just want to play an opponent online? What if I want to use one of Chess.com's other great tools?
I thought you'd never ask. With Chess Up 2, you can fully take advantage of the Chess.com integration by playing bots, analyzing your offline games, and even using our optional AI assistants to visualize the quality of moves with color-coded hints.
Well, holy Chess Up, you did it. You made IRL chess cool again.
You got it, Danny.
And how do you know my name?
Play chess today on the board of tomorrow.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Chess.com Open. We're continuing our coverage today, day 3. And Eric, now we are on to the matchup. Vyacheslav Duda, Denis Lazovic. We know it's going to be close. However, it is only going to be a best of 2 format. And when you think of these opponents, I think back to Magnus Carlsen and the fact that he's gone the distance with both of these players all the way to Armageddon. He did beat both of them, but this is, as close as it could be. Armageddon, 3-2 scores against Magnus, not to mention the form that both of these players have been showing individually in this event. Eric, when it comes to this matchup, Vyacheslav Duda not having played today, does that factor in at all? Are they going to be bringing the same level that they've had throughout?
I'm not sure if he's going to bring the same level. That level is so high, but I mean, we can only expect it. You ask a good question. He hasn't played today. What kind of warm-up is that? It can be difficult to just play a 2-game match, and that's all you play.
Yep.
Throughout the day. Not much. Not much warm-up. I think he definitely probably played some games online, got comfortable with the mouse. It is a bit more esports style. Like getting the mentality, flagging, playing quickly. Denis is warmed up, but based on what we've seen from the previous days, these guys are playing pretty much near their best, and it's very hard to predict. I mean, we can take a look at their matches versus Magnus, but you can also say styles make fights. Yes, there were 2 Armageddon matches. It felt like Duda versus Magnus. Duda was just doing better consistently and had great chances to win the match. Lazovic, he did benefit from a very uncharacteristic blunder in kind of an equal endgame. Doesn't mean he didn't play well, and it was a very, very close match. But Duda was just bringing it to Magnus.
He was.
So that was very bit different in how the matches played out. And can he break Lazovic, though? Yes. Magnus, when you play Magnus, he sometimes gives you chances with some of the openings, some of the choices. Denis doesn't. You really have to earn it. He's what happened last game, it felt like he won the first game, and the second game he just needed a draw. But the way he did it, Amon, that position was actually very hard to play, and he found so many nice moves. Because Nihal did just a really good job, and I'm thinking back on it. That knight d2 move, freeing up and pushing the b pawn, just being so cool in what is an objectively uncomfortable position.
Yep.
That always scores so many points in my head. I can't do that.
Yep.
Neither can a lot of the players.
Really difficult skill to master. Denis has it. It's not something he has to work on. He has it naturally. Nihal, for example, has that time scramble prowess, which is difficult to train and learn. So each you call styles make the matches. In this one, Jan Krzysztof Duda playing an opening here that I think we've seen before, maybe in this exact event as well. The players will be very, very familiar with it. Visually, though, it always will favor white. You have the isolated d pawn on d5. Even if things get traded, you could trade the queens, maybe the knights, even the bishops. The more you trade, it just doesn't change the fact that that pawn on d5 is a target. And we'll wait and see whether Dennis actually plays in a way where he plays rook d8, tries to take on f3 and play d4. Sometimes you try to just get rid of the weakness, and other times you can just accept that, okay, it's a weakness, but that's it. And I'm just going to accept that I have an isolated pawn and know that the position is more or less equal.
Yeah, it is a weakness, but Dennis's setup, I think, is pretty good, all things considered. D5's defended, rook d8, d4, you mentioned. The queen on f6 is one of those pieces I like, because it means if white gangs up on the pawn, you have to watch out for b2. Your queen can't commit to recapturing d5 without consequences. So white's setup takes some time before I really am like, this is a proper push.
Yeah, rook f to d1 is a very easy
Rook
and expected
c8.
move.
How do we generate more pressure on d5? How do we kick away this really good bishop on e4? If we trade everything off, I don't believe it. I think normally in the structure, black is supposed to be theoretically okay.
And he's also played the position in a way, he knows what setup he's going for. Knight on e6, bishop on e4. It's almost like I'm more used to seeing those pieces flipped around. Bishop on e6, knight on e4. It is a strange configuration to lead with the bishop, have the knight on this unusual square, but that tells me that it's a setup that Dennis simply knows belongs in this position, in this structure. It's a way to control d4 with the knight while defending d5 with the bishop. And often you see it opposite. You see the pawn may be defended by the knight on f6, but then you lose that d4 control.
I'm saying rook d8. I was just calculating, can white ever play knight d4? If you can play knight d4 and blockade that isolated pawn, so take back with a piece, that's nice. I'm just not sure I see the best way of doing so. What I want to avoid is knight d4, knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, because yes, the d5 pawn is on a light square, but it also blocks white's access to pressuring it. Black should be completely fine there.
Yeah, at some point, if you need to bail out a little bit as white, you can play knight d4. You can take it with the queen and then with the pawn, and you'll be at least visually better in that position. You can fight a little bit just due to the pawn being on that light square, but the objective evaluation is just 100% equal. And Dennis, I mean, I feel like if you're playing against anyone, Dennis is probably the guy who's going to make that draw so easily. Is this on the board, Eric?
On the board, yeah. I mean, this is a classical position. It's a pretty known position in the structure, and black, yeah, I mean, hardly ever loses it. You need access. I mean, you did mention pawns are on light squares. That's a little bit, and Duda will try, I'm sure, but black's king reaching d6, that's the way to deal with it. You don't want your bishop long term defending the d5 pawn. You would like to use your king, and then your bishop can free up. But sometimes they say that with principle of two weaknesses, we do see one weakness, maybe one target. You can argue for that, but where's the second? That's Duda's job here. Find a way to get a second weakness or a favorable exchange or an imbalance. That's why I'm showing rook c5. Does rook c5 work? Not necessarily. Let's just say rook c5 here. Takes, though, that's the type of exchange I want, because I take this way, I get a majority 3 versus 2 on the queen side, and I also open up my rook to put long-term pressure on the d5 pawn. I connect my pawns. That's something that's progress, but the problem is rook c5, e6 doesn't quite force it through. You can try a little bit, though.
Yeah, you can try a little bit. You can push. It feels like the pawns on dark squares for Dennis with f6, very smart. He's going to bring the king to d6. I think this was well played. Yes, you have to try rook c5, but the pawn will appear on b6. I know the king is approaching d6, so this probably won't be that relevant anymore, but sometimes you play rook c5, you get b6, and then you bring the rook back to c1, and you say, okay, now I have bishop a6. And it's a way to try to put some pressure on the c file. So if you imagine, rook
Yeah,
c5.
that's instructive. We'll play b6, rook here, and let's just say I'm just gonna move the bishop back.
Sure, yeah, just to
Bishop
prove
a6 forces the rook to make a decision. Can't stay on the c file unless you trade. But as you mentioned, that's how you gain the file. Either rook c7 or rook c8 is coming.
And if you play king e7, I might play bishop b5 to cover d7. Then I have rook c7. So it's just these small ways to try to penetrate the position are what Duda is going to be looking for. And I'll also point out, I feel that the winning chances for Dennis are pretty much obsolete. So this is one of those, probably a draw, but chances for white positions. I think Duda is fine with a draw, but I don't think that he's ready to accept it just yet.
Now, if he's able to make serious progress against Dennis here, that's really good, very promising for him, because going into this match, this isn't the type of position that I would identify as, hey, Dennis cracks here or could be uncomfortable. But as we mentioned, feels like a 2-result game, and something a bit different is white pushing these pawns, placing them purposefully on the light squares. That isn't always good in endgames when you look at the color of the bishops, but the idea here is it takes away mobility from Black's bishop, and he's valuing that as worth it, worth grabbing the space but putting them on the wrong color. Okay, now we have some more exchanges. Rook takes c1, rook takes c1, king e7. So Black's admitting, I'm going to give you the c file, I just don't think you have any good squares there.
And that was an achievement, not to understate. Rook e1 stopped king e7 because of some bishop a6 stuff. So, okay, can we take a move back there?
Why wasn't rook c8 played?
Yes. Rook c8.
Just to try.
Even the engine is saying, okay, no big deal. I don't agree with that at all. I think this is potentially a big deal. And at least it was something 100% that Dennis missed, because he shook his head like, how could I allow that? And Duda just didn't notice it.
And now we're inching closer to a draw, because with those rooks traded off and this king reaching that ideal square, d6, e7 and c7. If your rook goes to either file, it can't actually reach the 7th rank. And that allows, here we go, Dennis is just playing rook c8.
It's completely drawn, and I don't see a way to not trade the rooks.
Yeah, you can't allow Black to play rook c2.
I was going to say, with the bishop on d3, it was possible to react with rook g1. Here, this is, I mean, they'll agree to a draw in a couple of moves here. There's nothing in this position anymore.
Put your pawn on b6, a5. If the king ever, cut the king off.
Yeah, no targets here. d5 can be easily defended, and that's about it. Yeah, a bit of a shame for Duda. I thought that you could leave the bishop on d3 and keep the rook on.
We can go back. Yeah, so you like the bishop on d3.
Yes.
Because whenever the file gets contested, you're saying, I can give up the file.
Yeah.
The bishop on d3 controls c2 and c4. So if Black ever gets, I'm just going to make some moves, rook c8. With the bishop on d3, you want to react rook g1.
Yeah.
And maybe bring your king to d2 and keep g5 open. Just keep the game going.
Yeah. So if you wanted to do that, otherwise, maybe that idea of rook c5 and rook c1 we looked at earlier. But it's the first game here. Duda looked like he was willing to try a little bit, but not do anything excessive.
Expecting a draw offer soon, but totally normal to play on a bit. If the players had much less time, then we'd see some proper shuffling. But here, maybe Duda's just feeling it, right? Like he didn't play today. So for him, just having a proper 10-minute game, playing till the end, that's how he's warming up or getting in the zone. Like he doesn't want to just wait all day, play his first game, and agree to a draw at the first moment.
Like a couple of minutes.
He needs to feel loose, needs to feel like he was actually in a game, and every single moment he was focused on it. Like even the mentality of, oh, this is just a draw. No, just get into that like maximalist attitude.
Well, I mean, based on that game, I think Dennis can be extremely satisfied. Played with the black pieces, absolutely zero danger. Duda didn't really get anything going, and it can be a little disheartening. Duda's kind of joining the match, maybe not getting anything with white. Now you find yourself with the black pieces. Remember, it's only a 2-game match. Dennis wins this game. That's it. So there's a lot of pressure here for Duda to sort of play the same game again, right? If you're going to play that game with white, you have to be able to replicate it with the black pieces.
Come on, look at this. Game 2. Lazovic has been playing e4 in many of his games this event. He's back to d4, but not a Catalan, not a Queen's Indian. F3 Nimzo, like a3. Like, this is one of the sharpest lines in d4. Such an imbalance already. 2 bishops and the center for white. Doubled c-pawns, though. The structure is a bit weak, and this leads to very, very sharp chess.
It does. We saw him play that sort of Trumpovsky-esque position earlier, and usually what happens is, that c-pawn can even be given up, and you just play for the pressure anyway. Playing f3 and then playing f4 is something that has to be seen as unusual. I mean, why would you play the moves in that order? But depending on the setup that he was going to see, I think he was going to react differently. And if queen a4, we do have knight d2 to watch over that c-pawn. However, you often see this c-pawn even sacrificed because you can just go all out with e5, f5, short castle.
When the queen goes to d7 early, before castling, why black might consider queenside castling. That's one way to sidestep potentially this pawn avalanche coming through. But the other benefit is sometimes the queen slides over to a4 and puts additional pressure here. I'm just not seeing, I think there's e5, maybe knight d2. Dennis playing this opening, it does confirm what I was thinking. He's been playing e4, playing this line, really adding an edge to his repertoire, making challenging players immediately from the get-go, not just relying on, hey, I'll play slightly better positions. This is not that opening. This is an opening where you go in for the kill. It forces you to attack because long-term, that pawn structure is not favorable in endgames. So you have to make it count in the middle game with your pawn center and the bishop pair.
And it is black's turn here, an important choice. Queen a4, tempting, but we're going to see what mentality Dennis is in. Knight d2 is a quick and easy move to defend. e5 would be a very direct move. We see the queenside castle. It seems odd maybe with the open b file. Why would we castle queenside? But trust me, it is so much scarier for those watching to castle kingside because everything is pointing in that direction. And the move e5 would lead to probably a vicious attack just a couple moves later. So black's king is actually much safer on the queen side.
Yeah, everything is pointing there for white. And all of black's pieces, we got the 3 pieces, the 3 musketeers on the queen side. Your chance of an attack being successful is so much greater when your opponent's pieces are big distance away from the king. I mean, you just have the math. The math works out. You got all the attacking pieces. They don't have the defenders. So makes a lot of sense for Duda the queenside castle. But I have to say, I like white's position right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we're seeing rook b4 will kick this queen out. Then there is a potential to play knight b3. So knight e7 has been rerouted so that maybe it can support the knight on a5 with knight c6. And if black could have the pawn structure, go in his direction, I think it would be an idea to put the pawns on dark squares, like e5, c5, and try to close things up that way. White's not going to let that happen so easily. If we consider f5 for white, black could play e5, but then I think we'd see f6. And it's a very direct, aggressive way to play. But I understand starting with rook b4. Defending your c-pawn, there's this classic idea of c5 that you can always consider. But he decides to protect the pawn and then finally get that knight back.
I didn't like rook b4 because black's queen was on the queen side. That f5 move was stronger for white. Now that the queen is back on d7, harder to achieve. The queen's back in the game. The rook on b4 is a bit awkward. You kick the queen away from a4. That means probably value a4 as a dangerous square because now white eventually is probably moving the rook back from b4 somewhere. It's not a long-term square unless it's connected with some very concrete idea of c5. If that's the case, rook on b4 is fine, but In certain positions, it's just going to be a target, whether that's c5 or knight c6. And I'm not quite seeing it.
It's a practical choice here to play this game from Duda. It's something that I feel like the engine will never agree with, but it is really annoying to play against. You see him angling for this dark square pawn setup. If we see, probably the worst move in the position, worst idea, d5 for white, black will respond probably e5, and the knight from a5 can maybe go to b7 and c5. Could even break with the move c6 and open things up. So I'm a little concerned about the dark squares, and it looks like if we see d5 e5, there probably has to be tactics, right? The move c5 for white. If you don't have tactics, you're positionally busted.
The good thing for white, though, is there's resources in the position. This opening would not be viable. It would always be bad if, those double C pawns are just sitting there. No, you get this big center, and there's tactical opportunities of breaking through and opening up for the bishops. There's been some fantastic games in the past in this opening, just very rich, sharp games. Here, Dennis playing bishop e3. I wonder at what moment is he playing c5? We're talking about the pawn breaks.
Yeah.
You see these 4 pawns as a game c5, d5, e5, f5. We're angling towards the queen side, which is c5 to me.
That's right. And even if c5 happens, you can probably, well, first of all, you could leave it there. You could take with the d pawn for black, and then maybe pressure on d3. So it seems like Duda's happy to take this full dark square pawn approach. And this is the idea to open the d file.
It's
the
pinned.
king probably wants to hide on a8. One idea that I was waiting for from white, we didn't see it. We saw bishop e3, but I was actually considering a4, maybe to give up the pawn and try to play bishop a3, bishop b4, and then use the a file, because that could actually apply a lot of pressure.
Dennis is playing a slower approach here. Sometimes these games get very sharp right away. It hasn't happened. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. In fact, it means it's likely to happen when the players don't have as much time to think, which could be pretty exciting. He doesn't like d5. Those earlier positions, we looked at d5. I was trying to figure that out. Can you play d5? We had mentioned e5, but now c5 in certain positions is a serious threat. Like here,
Absolutely.
You could play c5 and get away with it after taking on e5. And why do I want to play d5? I also want to centralize my knight. I want to get my knight to e6 or get some good squares with it. It is a risky move, but it has some serious upside.
My general feeling about these games is that if white plays slow, black is happy, because there's so many small moves that black wants to get in the position, like h6, like king b8, king a8, rook he8. All these moves help the position. I'm not sure that white's position is helped as much by knight d2, bishop f2. White's position is good to begin with, and black feels like he's trying to catch up a little bit to the evaluation.
Yeah, definitely catching up. But as we mentioned before, trades generally favor black. The endgame structure is nice, which is leading me to discuss the move f5 here. f5, it does open things up. Is that good for black? But I just want to question what you'll do as white. You play e5, then you, Amon, as a French player, you see d5, I think you're pretty excited.
That's right.
The idea of trading off the light squared bishops. Just say take, bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes d5. f4 is a bit weak without the bishops. Doesn't feel like the king can be attacked as effectively. And there's a g5 counterplay. Feels like there's some control for black here. So he's gone rook f8 instead, giving Dennis another opportunity to figure out, how do I launch this initiative? Or am I okay just being timid, hesitant, feeling out process? a4 is a move you've mentioned. Is it playable? Yeah, it's double-edged. You're sacrificing a pawn and arguing. Let's just say queen takes a4, rook a1, queen goes back. There's a big attack here. And there are ideas. There's rook b1. Maybe you sack the exchanges.
Absolutely.
All in. Rook a1, sack the exchange, but you take here, and at the right moment, you open up your bishops and target the king. All decent ideas.
I Also wonder if Black's thinking about the move G5. If you're really committed to this idea of C5, E5, and G5 being good moves, then this makes sense to undermine maybe the E5 square. And it might not be tempting for White to maintain it with G3 because suddenly things open up on the king side. If I'm looking for a slow waiting move, which it seems like Vyacheslav Duda has been playing, I might go king A8. It feels only useful for that king to leave the B file.
Yeah, it feels like neither player has a really firm grasp of the position in the sense of what they want to do. So they're debating. I mean, G5, that's a critical decision. That changes the position completely. The F file will be contested. Dennis playing bishop B3. He's saying, this is going to open up. I don't need to decide what to do in the center. I can now actually just play on the king side. I can pivot. Maybe queen H5, go pawn hunting, not necessarily immediately, but after some trades. And that will force Duda probably to even play the queen back to A4 and counterattack over here.
Right.
Because the F file feels like long-term, White can fight for it a bit better.
Yeah, G5 I thought made sense, but Dennis has the benefit of, I think he's decided mentally that he's okay waiting. And Duda, I feel like he isn't fully committed to that because they're both waiting, but Duda's spending much more time on his moves. He had a time advantage. It's now dwindled. It's a minute and a half extra for Dennis. When things do inevitably open up, something will happen in this game. It feels like the guy who has more time is going to be able to navigate that better.
Yeah, you notice at some point you're down on the clock, but if all the pieces are on the board, you don't have an easy way of just trading off or simplifying the position. It makes it so much harder to play. So you mentioned the time situation. Duda has to play almost immediately because it's just too complicated to play this position well with a minute on the clock. You have to avoid time trouble.
Yep, he's shaking his head. Usually you don't want to play bishop b7 back. The pressure on c4 is what you like. So this isn't something I think he's fully satisfied with. One thing he might be preparing, is exactly that. C5, which is making me think of c5. So I think that bishop b7 blocking the b file, the intention might be pawn c5. So it's maybe a race to that move.
Yeah, c5 is extra, beneficial. The rook is on e8. There's not any pressure on d3 anymore. And let's just say here, take the bishop not hanging. It changes everything. Let's say you go rook here, bishop b5. White's grabbing the initiative here and asking some serious questions. Do you play c6?
Yeah, the knight on a5 is going to be stuck.
Knight on a5 is stranded. Feels like White's making progress in terms of attacking. d5, that doesn't look right. What does that do?
Well, the thing with d5, it's so shocking, is that it was so much better, it felt like, when the bishop was on a6 and there was a pin on the b file and the bishop on a6 was loose. Now, it's almost justifying that previous move. I would absolutely be thinking about e5 here, but the main question is, what is the follow-up? And I think it has to be, the only justification is like, you try to trade this knight, rook b5, rook takes a5. That's a common way that you handle this position, is you sack directly on a5 and you play c5. And it cannot be avoided here because there's just no time. So I don't think you want to play f5. Maybe it's possible. I have to calculate. Basically, I don't want to let black play bishop c8 and knight b7.
But there's c5. You can't play bishop c8. So if I go f5, I think your idea works. Rook b5, rook takes, bishop c8, c5 opens up everything, and all these pieces are useless to black's rooks.
This is why I was saying, Eric, I wanted to play king a8. There's something about, I wanted to get off the b file.
This is a bit surprising, but I did mention I thought the kingside pawns were weak. Dennis is thinking about moving the queen here. I was just worried about some counterplay, but objectively, I think White can grab that H file.
Okay, he's gone for something that I definitely didn't think was the most dangerous in the position at all. I was really concerned about rook b5, rook takes a5. The bishops are going to be very strong here, but there's Duda has to be happy here. I think this could have been a lot worse.
He has to be happy, but there's something you mentioned that I think will be a factor in this game. The knight on a5. It's not in the game right now, and it's path back is blocked by the other knight on c6. So I can see some position where that knight is offside and it impacts the rest of the game. If I'm Duda, I'm looking to trade right away and circle my knights back in. Because tactically, 2 knights on the queen side, I don't think serve. I'm not saying it's bad at all, but I could see it when it gets sharp and the players get in time trouble, being a bit slow.
That's right. Bishop g3, maybe h5.
Oh, this is nice though. He's trying to weaken the light square diagonal. I think 4 is bishop. You have h4 putting pressure here, and then h3, and there's not a good way necessarily to stop that.
Yep, that looks strong. And it's a nice way to just get some quick moves in. It's a great reaction to bishop f2, bishop g3. Time is going to start to be a factor. We knew this game would open up. I wasn't sure if he was going to go for this. Rook f5, and if knight c6, he's planning to take it. However, I guess you can take with the queen, get the queen out of the way, and tuck the king in the corner.
Yeah, that's really nice. Black will lose some material back. I mean, black's temporarily up a piece, but this long diagonal is worth so much. Bishop takes, queen takes.
That's right.
And let's just say we trade everything off. We can do that.
Safe.
Or even king a8. h4 is coming, e4 is loose. This endgame is very unpleasant because
terrible.
The bishop is dominant for black.
Yep. And the problem is you almost don't have a choice. Next move, I'm going to play king a8. And you might not win the material back that you're looking for. So I think you might have to play bishop takes c6, but the time is ticking down. Time advantage now for Duda. You can tell Dennis does not like how this calculation has gone. The blue arrow move spotted by Vyacheslav Duda, and he's starting, I think, to take real control of this game, Eric.
Yeah, I feel like this position is still a bit foreign for Lazovic. He's forced to play in a style that he's developing, but what do we see here? A really bad pawn structure and bad endgames. That's an uncomfortable spot. I'm not used to seeing him here. And yeah, fact of the matter is, in this game where he had white, it was a tied match. He took a lot of risk here. Right now, it's falling apart. E4, there's just no good moves here. And he's forced to just, okay, go for this imbalance. Rook versus 2 pieces.
Yep.
So, for example, rook takes e8. You don't have time to take on h5. e4 is loose. But look at black's king. Now completely safe. There's no more threats. Feels like white's king is worse. And
Queen e8 guards
Queen
all the
e8 was
pawns.
played. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I mean, it just goes to show how much he did not like that other position. He would rather play
Nice
this one.
move. Very nice move, setting up rook takes e5. Dennis his position's not good. It's probably objectively losing. His job is to just be as tricky as possible. And he's gotten better and better at that in the last couple of years.
Queen e7.
Queen d6. Yeah.
Queen e7.
Queen e7 is a nice move.
Okay, you've got that. The h-pawn holds everything back for black. That's really nice. And he is going to play h3. Interesting. I just said hold everything back, and that actually kind of frees things up.
I wonder if you just try to win the a pawn and start pushing it to force white's rooks to play a bit more passively. He's going to go rook e8 now. Yeah, 3 attackers here.
Yeah, you have more pieces. You can
King
safely
g1,
capture.
king h2.
At least white has that h-pawn.
Clear plan. Push the h-pawn all the way to h7 and try to win that rook.
And here comes the knight to assist.
Not totally over yet. There's ways to mess this up.
Yeah, knight f6 and bishop c6. Yeah, knight f6. I think you're at the point where you might give up the rook and the knight for maybe a rook and a pawn. You could just take on a4 as an idea, 3 pawns and a bishop.
3 pawns and a bishop.
Yeah,
that's a
you also
2-result
have bishop
game.
e8.
Yeah. Oh, we lost the.
Okay. Once again, it looks like they're playing faster than the moves can register here, and no surprise though, Eric, that the 2 pieces were able to take care of things there, right? Duda played an opening that I thought actually Dennis was going to find more success with, but Dennis never broke the game. he never opened things up. And that opening is when you have to open things up in. It just never happened. Duda takes the win with the black pieces and comes in after not playing at all today. We take a look at the bracket. Eric, we get to see Duda dropping down from the winners final, immediately saying, don't forget about me, I'm actually right back up in the grand final, spends no time in the losers bracket, beats Denis Lazovic, and will face off, Eric, against Magnus Carlsen in the grand final, where, by the way, he's going to have to beat him not only in a match, but he's going to have to do it twice if he wants to win the Chess.com Open.
Yeah, doing it twice. I'm just thinking about the match we just saw, though. Denis played that opening, and I feel like the fact that he's qualified for the EWC impacted it. If he was fighting for that spot, I think he would have stuck to his bread and butter, a more solid opening approach. But this is something he's decided will benefit his chess. It might have some growing pains. When you learn new structures, it takes time. There's an adjustment period. And you mentioned those positions, you have to time your breaks and open it up. Never got it going, but this is a valuable experience and practice in the future that he'll just continue improving how he plays those positions and widening his range of how he plays. So I think a bit of investment in his chess. But anyways, it's still a great fight between the two. Duda, Lazovic, Magnus, feels like those are the three guys that have stood out so far. So not a surprise that we see Magnus and Duda in the grand final.
Not at all. It was an exciting match the first time. It will definitely deliver again. And obviously, we are going to have the winner of that match, Jan Krzysztof Duda, join us for an interview. And as we set that up, we're going to head to a break. And before we do, remind everybody about Neuro Gum and Mints. Regular old gum just doesn't do much for you. But Neuro Energy and Focus is made with natural caffeine and L-theanine to create that steady energy that focuses your mind and your body. Now that's pretty smart, especially when you need to lock in and stay calm under pressure. You can use code CHESS20 for an exclusive 20% off discount site-wide. That's only for our community here at Chess.com. So head over to go.chess.com/neuro, and that's !neuro in the chat as well to save 20% off and try it for yourself. We'll be right back with an interview with our winner of that matchup, Jan Krzysztof Duda.
The 2026 Esports World Cup Champions Chess Tour qualification cycle is packed with year-round action, huge prizes, and endless drama. Every single week, the world's best players battle in Title Tuesday for a cut of $3,000 in prizes and valuable tour points, awarded based on each player's best 8 results in each of 3 Title Tuesday Grand Prix splits. Beginning in October, the Speed Chess Championship, Chess.com's premier event, kicks off. 16 of the world's absolute best online blitz and bullet players compete for $250,000 in prize money, 3 qualification spots directly to the EWC finals, and tour points. Finally, in March, we have the Chess.com Open. The world's biggest Grand Prix split will be joined by 8 additional qualifiers. These 16 players are fighting for 3 qualification spots to the EWC finals, another $250,000, and even more tour points. When the dust settles, the Champions Chess Tour will send 3 qualifiers from the SEC, 3 from the Chess.com Open, and the next 6 players on the tour leaderboard to battle the reigning champion, Magnus Carlsen, live in Riyadh for one of the year's largest prize purses. Chess is here. Heartbreak, brilliance. Blunders, drama, joy. This is the Champions Chess Tour qualification cycle for the Esports World Cup.
Busy day. Come on, honey. Oh, man. Eric. Magnus, you gotta be kidding me, man. Don't they know that I'm working? When I'm struggling to get through my day, I rely on Neurogum to give me the energy and the focus that I need to keep up with a busy life. My wife needs me. My kids need me. The kids can wait. Me and Danny Bot have got work to do. Feels good to focus on what matters.
I talked to Movahed, evident there. So can you be the first EWC two-sport star in chess and counter?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I know, you mean, can I become a professional Counter-Strike player?
Yeah, international player for both sports.
No, it's impossible because I saw how they're playing, and like for me, it's a little bit impossible to. I can play. I can play 10 hours with computer. For me, it will be fine. But it's very hard to training with Counter Strike because I saw their trainings. I saw the videos how they're training. I mean, it's impossible to me training like this because I'm just love to play. I just love to do some small tricks, but not that like professional playing. And I mean, they're really professionals, but okay, I just want to beat my friends. That's all what I need to play from Counter Strike, just to be better in my friends' company.
That totally makes sense.
Gum is dumb. Neuro is smart. Gum.
Zenni is the official eyewear partner of Chess.com. They have hundreds, no, thousands of affordable frames that you can try on virtually from home and customize to your liking. I personally use their blue light blocking glasses every single day, especially in the afternoon when the workday gets long and I know I'm going to be putting in the extra hours of screen time staring at chess while I lose one bullet game after another. But okay, you might not be losing as many bullet games as me, but you definitely need to protect your eyes just as much as anyone else. So consider heading over to Zenni and use the promo code CHESS to save 15% on any pair of glasses.
Welcome back, everyone, to our coverage of the Chess.com Open. We're in the playoffs, and we're joined by the winner of that matchup, Grandmaster Jan Krzysztof Duda. Jan, hello, congratulations. You're back into the grand final, a rematch against Magnus Carlsen. But I'd like to start by saying congrats on possibly the most coveted thing that you won, which is a direct qualification to the Esports World Cup. Just wanted to ask you what that meant to you, getting back to the EWC and earning that spot through the Chess.com Open here.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, thank you for the nice words. Yeah, of course, I'm very pleased with qualifying to esports. You know, I'm looking forward to playing better than last year. But once you spoil your game in move 5, then it can really get worse, can it? Like, I mean, potentially you can get scorer mate, I guess, but it's still unlikely. So overall, I think I played reasonably well in this tournament. Of course, once you start winning those matches, your appetite is up. You want, and yeah, I was a bit upset, about my match with Magnus because it felt like I was playing decent chess and had some chances. But yeah, I mean, in the end, okay, I basically should have eaten something, I guess, before Armageddon because I kind of ran out of steam, I would say, and he was fine like all the way along, of course, but I basically started, missing each of his moves, at least I missed like 4 moves, I think, the best moves of his. So yeah, but I mean, today's match was also kind of very, very, very tense, obviously. I don't think it was any good quality, to be honest. It was just a battle of nerves, and yeah, I'm happy, I delivered in the end.
Jan, I wanted to ask, yesterday you lost your very first game against Jan, and then you just beat him 3 games in a row. You beat Movahed, you beat Sarin, and those are some of the fastest, sharpest players in the field. Is there something about that style that you enjoy? Also being, playing against these really good, sharp players that brings out some of the best in you?
Yeah, it's often about the momentum, of the day, because historically Nepo has always been a difficult opponent for me. And after game one, indeed, I basically thought what I was doing there, in this tournament, because it was such a pathetic game. Like, I didn't get anything with white. I blundered a pawn, and I was like, what is this? But but somehow in the second game, I won with black, like in 28 moves or something, which was like unexpected. And afterwards, I got the momentum. I just happened, to be in good place, in a good time. So against Sina again. Before the match, I had done probably I had played like the most shameful game ever against him in one of the Armageddons, in some other tournaments. And basically, I was clearly underperforming against him. So winning in 3 games was kind of unexpected. But also I got lucky in the second game, because I was being pressed, and then somehow I found this C5 tactics, and I was just winning, out of nowhere. So you have to try not to collapse at once, and also have a fair amount of luck, and then there's a hope.
a good combination of both at all times. Yeah, I have to ask just about that same match, kind of the beginning of the event. In this playoff format, you were selected as an opponent. Is there any part of you that feels kind of like, oh, I was selected first? Doesn't mean that you're sort of the weakest pick, but do you feel any way about being selected first as an opponent, and maybe now being in the grand final?
I was a bit surprised. On the other hand, Nepo said that he didn't want to be, in a draw with Magnus, so it makes sense, because I was, in the other one. So, and also, as said, usually he did very well against me. Of course, I won some online matches, some games. I knocked him out from one Grand Prix, like in 2019 or something. But in general, he has always been clearly ahead, and that was a bit upsetting. But on the other hand, it's also nice not to have responsibility, not to have to pick yourself, because then if it goes south, you are upset, that maybe you should have chosen another opponent. And in this case, even if I had lost against Nepo, it would have been nothing could have been changed. So in general, everyone here is difficult, obviously. So in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the best decision of his. But you never know.
Wanted to ask, there's a question from the chat, SJ McFarland. He's asking, you're playing Magnus tomorrow. Do you prepare for him differently than other players?
I don't know what's my strategy, to be honest. In general, I didn't really prepare for the event. Usually it's about, getting some plebe position after the opening, hopefully some maneuvering game. It depends also on the opponent. Of course, it's, bit unlucky that I have to win twice. It doesn't seem very realistic, to be honest. But okay, I will just try to, play good chess, and maybe there will be some chance, but no idea about openings. Maybe I will think about it, but in general, I was playing randomly. I had some because I kind of prepared is maybe too strong of a word, but I had some ideas what to do against Nepo, and then I played this first game, and it was why did I play this line, and stuff, and and then when I started, to freestyle more, then my results got better. So I don't know what's the was the strategy, to be honest.
Right. Well, no matter what, you had absolutely one of the closest and very entertaining matches against Magnus Carlsen. The first time, you're going to be back tomorrow for the grand final. So we'll let you go. And once again, a congrats, not just for making it to the grand final, but for securing your place in the Esports World Cup. So we look forward to seeing your games tomorrow, as well as a lot more of you in the EWC.
Yeah, thank you. See you around.
Good luck tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, that is Jan Krzysztof Duda. Great to get his thoughts there, Eric, after just coming in and playing 2 quick games, right? Not playing any other chess, in terms of many matches on the same day. Just it could have gone a different direction, but he came in composed, and he described in the interview there, battle of nerves. As we can see now, all the way at the end, the grand final is set. He had better nerves than Denis Lazovic when it came down to it. And the grand final is going to be Carlsen versus Duda. And you can see top left of your screen, the winner's final. He really felt, Eric, I think he was alluding in the interview, he thought he played well enough to almost earn that victory against Magnus in the previous match. If he can bring that same level, I absolutely think there's a chance for Duda against Magnus Carlsen, if it's anything like their first encounter.
For sure. I think that was a nice, honest interview, because how he described today makes a lot of sense. When you think about the match against Lazovic, the first game, he didn't get any real pressure that he wanted. And it was kind of a draw without too much challenge. In the second game, both players were afraid for a long time to make that committal move. That I think nerves was such a big factor in that. But yeah, as always, a lot of these players are quite critical of themselves, even when they play really, really well. And sounds like he's looking forward to playing Magnus, even though he said, it seems unrealistic to win twice. You just start with that first match win and you build from there. So we'll see if he can take that first set. He'll have to win the match. But yeah, that's something we're looking forward to. That Kings Indian game stands out to me yesterday, that both players were ready to fight and play really aggressive chess.
Yeah, we saw Magnus in some 3-2 matchups, some very, very close ones, but ultimately, I think the Duda matchup was the closest by far. It was the toughest test for Magnus. He still overcame it, but it was just barely in Armageddon. So we'll be hosting the grand final and the reset if necessary. So if Jan Krzysztof Duda beats Magnus in the first match, we will see a second set. But if Magnus wins the first set, then that is it. And nonetheless, you could say it's been a phenomenally successful tournament. He's faced different styles, all the elite players in the event, players that he might face again in the EWC. And he really handled some of these matches. Eric, he didn't even go to 4 games. So I think Duda has a lot to, we talk about how critical the players are. He has a lot to be proud of. And of course, the achievement, making it back to EWC is exactly what he came here to do.
Yeah, I think if I was in his shoes, your main goal is to qualify for the EWC. That mission is done. Playing Magnus is something the players, this is your career. You want to play the very best players, challenge yourself, beat the best players. So I think he has a lot to look forward to tomorrow. I think we're going to get a great match, but it's now there's pressure when you play Magnus always, but that EWC spot is so important that he can relax a bit in the sense of, let's try to play the best against Magnus, not think about that ticket, that spot. Now it's just me against the best player in the world. Let's make it count, but let's have some fun.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we have in store. So we will hopefully see all of you watching tomorrow for the grand final. Magnus Carlsen, Jan Krzysztof Duda, the rematch, and potentially multiple matches. We'll see, but we hope to have all of you back for the finale of the Chess.com Open. We'll see you guys tomorrow, same time and same place.